Get comfortable and consider a question. What did the staff of a Victorian theatre really know about the performers they saw each day? You may picture the performer as a distant star, appearing from nowhere when the curtain rises, dressed perfectly and speaking every line as though the words have only just occurred to them. The audience sees confidence, elegance, wit, sorrow, and surprise. It does not see the chalk marks inside a bodice, the spare gloves waiting on a labelled shelf, or the dresser counting under her breath during a change of clothes. It does not hear the stage manager correcting an entrance for the 4th time that morning. It does not know who arrived early, who remembered a difficult piece of business, or who returned a hired costume with its hem torn loose. Tonight, you will see the theatre from the other side of the painted scenery. You will learn what its workers know, not from scandal, gossip, or intrusion, but from repetition. They know through cue sheets and costume lists. They know through paybooks, rehearsal calls, damaged buttons, polished shoes, and the small habits that become visible when the same people work together 6 days a week. If you enjoy spending these long hours in the working rooms of the past, you can subscribe. And as you settle in, you might consider which backstage position would have suited you best: keeping the prompt book, guarding the stage door, managing the properties, or taking charge of a crowded wardrobe. Now let the room around you grow still, and let us go back. It is the autumn of 1895. The place is London, in a prosperous theatre close to the Strand. Outside, the streets carry the mixed sounds of wheels, hooves, footsteps, and newspaper sellers. Cabs draw up beneath signs painted with the names of current productions. Posters present the company in carefully arranged ranks, with the largest lettering reserved for those whom management wishes the public to remember. Nearby restaurants are preparing for the trade that comes before and after an evening performance. Shop windows throw pale rectangles of light onto the pavement. The theatre itself stands behind a bright public entrance, but that is not the door you use. You enter by the stage door, where the building presents another face. Here there is no carpeted foyer and no polished arrangement of programs. There is a narrow office, a register, a rack for messages, and a doorkeeper who notices every arrival without appearing surprised by any of them. Beyond lie passages with practical paint, steep stairs, workrooms, dressing rooms, storage spaces, and the stage itself. You are the wardrobe mistress. The word mistress signifies authority within your department. It does not mean that every condition is under your control. You answer to management, work closely with the stage manager, and spend much of your day responding to decisions made elsewhere. A scene may be altered. An entrance may move, a performer may need a different fastening because there is no longer enough time to manage the old one. A hired garment may arrive late. A fabric that appeared sound yesterday may reveal a weak seam beneath the stronger light of the workroom. You supervise the theatre's costumes and the labor required to keep them ready. Depending upon the size of the production, one or more dressers assist you. Extra hands may be brought in for a large cast, an elaborate spectacle, or a change that must be completed in less than a minute. You maintain inventories, arrange repairs, inspect laundry, oversee fittings, distribute garments, and make sure that each article returns to its proper place. The work requires memory, judgment, speed, and a steady manner. It also requires a great many needles. Your workroom is not grand. A broad table occupies much of it, its surface marked by years of scissors, pins, chalk, and hot irons. Shelves hold boxes for trim, hooks, eyes, tapes, buttons, feathers, artificial flowers, and lengths of material retained because a matching scrap may save a costume later. Garments hang from rails beneath cotton covers. Some belong to the theatre. Some have been hired from a costumer. Others are the property of individual performers, though they may still pass through your hands for adjustment. A ledger rests near the table. It records what memory alone should not be asked to carry: the owner of a coat, the wearer of a gown, the date of an alteration, the replacement of a collar, the condition in which a hired item arrived, and the condition in which it must be returned. These records tell their own restrained story. A leading performer may have a costume cut or hired expressly for the role. A supporting player may receive an older garment altered to create the correct outline. One member of the company wears through the inside of a cuff with remarkable speed. Another strains the same seam whenever a scene demands a sudden turn. A third returns every glove paired, every ribbon smoothed, and every small ornament placed safely on the dressing table. None of these observations tells you what a person is like in every part of life. They tell you how that person works in a theatre. That distinction matters. The popular image of backstage knowledge is built around secrets. It imagines servants, dressers, callers, and doorkeepers gathering private information simply because they stand close to celebrated people. Yet the most useful knowledge inside a theatre is rarely sensational. It is knowledge of practice. The dresser knows whether a performer lifts an arm before the sleeve is ready. The property worker knows whether a cup will be returned to the marked table after a scene. The carpenter knows whether an entrance will be made at the expected pace. The prompter knows which pause is deliberate and which pause requires help. The musician knows whether a cue is being approached steadily. The stage doorkeeper knows who needs a second message and who will arrive before the appointed call without prompting. This understanding is built one performance at a time. Victorian theatre depends upon the appearance of effortlessness. A door in painted scenery must seem like part of a solid room. A forest made from canvas, timber, pigment, and carefully directed light must hold the audience's attention as though it continues far beyond the stage. A performer must cross to the correct position without looking down for a mark. A costume must suggest wealth, age, occupation, or period at once, even to someone seated high in the gallery. The audience is meant to see the finished effect, not the work that holds it together. You live among that work. At the start of each performance day, you inspect what the previous one has left behind. A crushed trim can be raised. A loosened hook can be replaced. A collar can be exchanged. A skirt can be brushed, aired, and pressed. These are ordinary tasks, but the production rests on their completion. A fastening that fails at the wrong moment may delay a change. A delayed change may hold an entrance. A held entrance may force other performers and stage workers to adjust. The theatre is full of such chains. Every visible action is attached to several invisible preparations. Your position gives you an unusually clear view of them. You work near enough to the performers to observe their physical methods, yet your attention remains on the garment and the schedule. You learn who stands patiently during a fitting and who continues practicing a speech while you pin the hem. You know who prefers a fastening at the side and who needs a loop made larger for a hurried hand. You know which costume can be trusted for another week and which one must be strengthened before tonight. You also know that applause is an incomplete form of accounting. It rewards the person seen beneath the light. It cannot easily divide itself among the hands that prepared the sleeve, set the property, checked the line, moved the scenery, opened the curtain, or carried a message through the passages. The audience may sense that the performance is well managed, but it cannot name every act of management. This does not lessen the performer's skill. Standing before a full house demands memory, control, attention, and the ability to repeat a role without allowing it to feel stale. The performer listens, adjusts, and keeps the pace of a scene while the audience watches every gesture. Yet that skill operates inside a system of shared labor. The staff understand this because they see the joins. Today will give you more than the usual number of chances to inspect those joins. There are 2 performances. The first is an afternoon matinee. The second begins in the evening and will carry the company toward midnight. Before either audience enters, there is a rehearsal for altered movements and an awkward transition that did not run cleanly the night before. Several costumes require fitting. Laundry must be checked and entered. A parcel of replacement trim is expected from a supplier. A skirt must be shortened so that its wearer can manage a flight of stage stairs without disturbing the line of the scene. After the rehearsal, the building must change character. During the morning, it is a workshop. Scenery stands in the working light. Instructions are spoken at full volume. Dust is swept from places an audience will never see. A carpenter crosses the stage carrying a tool. A property assistant tests a drawer that must open on cue. A musician may repeat a passage while the company waits. No one mistakes this for the finished illusion. By early afternoon, the public side begins to wake. The box office deals with bookings and inquiries. Attendants prepare programs. Doors are checked. The brighter lamps are lit. Patrons arrive through the entrance you did not use, bringing outdoor air, damp coats, perfume, and the soft commotion of people finding their places. Backstage, the half-hour call begins the final sequence of preparation. Hair is arranged. Face paint is applied for distance and strong illumination. Shoes are fastened. Jewelry is checked against costume lists. Gloves are placed where the correct hand can find them. Every garment must be ready in the order in which it will be worn, not in the order that looks neatest on a rail. When the matinee ends, there will be little time for satisfaction. Damp costumes must be aired. Collars must be changed. Shoes may need attention. A weakened fastening that survived the afternoon cannot simply be trusted for the evening. The evidence of one performance becomes the work list for the next. Then supper. Another half-hour call, another overture, another sequence of entrances and changes. After the evening curtain falls, the audience will leave believing that the day has ended. For you, it continues. Costumes must be collected, counted, examined, sorted, and covered. Items for the laundry must be separated from those requiring repair. Hired pieces must not vanish into the wrong cupboard. Pins must be removed before a garment reaches an unsuspecting hand tomorrow. Only after midnight will the ledger close. For now, the theatre is still between last night and today. The public doors remain shut. The auditorium waits in dimness, its rows of seats facing a stage that has not yet begun to pretend. You remove your outdoor things, place the wardrobe key where your hand can find it, and open the workroom door. The first garment is already waiting for you. It is a pale silk bodice from the second act, turned inside out and laid across the work table. One side seam has opened by less than an inch. The damage is small, but its position matters. Under the pull of an extended arm, that narrow opening will widen. From the stalls, no one would notice the first loose stitch. By the end of a vigorous scene, everyone might. A note pinned to the lining gives the role, the act, and the dressing room. No performer's name is required. Within these walls, clothing is tracked by function. The bodice belongs to a character, appears at a fixed point in the play, and must be ready for a particular entrance. That is enough to begin. You carry it toward the window. Morning light is better than lamplight for close inspection, though the glass admits little of it. The back of the theatre faces a narrow service passage where the buildings stand close together. Autumn damp has clouded the lower panes. You run a finger beneath the seam, testing the cloth around the split. The silk is sound, only the thread has failed. It can be repaired before rehearsal. Outside the workroom, the theatre is waking by departments. A broom moves across the passage in short, hard strokes. Somewhere below, a porter shifts a crate over a stone floor. The wheels catch at each joint and produce a regular knocking sound. From the stage comes the scrape of timber as the carpenters examine a flat used in the final scene. Someone opens a door, and the smell of wet pavement briefly enters before the door closes again. You thread a needle, place several close stitches through the strengthened lining, and secure the end where it will not rub against the performer. A stage garment is rarely repaired only for appearance. It must also feel right in motion. A knot in the wrong place can distract a performer through an entire scene, and distraction has a way of traveling. A hand reaches twice for a fastening. An entrance begins a few seconds late. A cue is held. The audience may never identify the cause, but the workers behind the scenery will feel the delay passing from one department to another. By 9 o'clock, the stage door has admitted most of the morning staff. The stage doorkeeper sits beside the entrance with the arrival book open. The position may look modest: a desk, a chair, a bell, rows of hooks, and a view of the passage. Yet almost everyone must pass that point. Letters are delivered there, parcels are left there, tradespeople explain their business there, call notices can be checked against the people who have actually arrived. The doorkeeper does not need to pry into anyone's life. The book supplies enough useful information. A carpenter arrives before his call because a hinge needs replacing. A dresser enters with a paper packet of fresh braid. A supporting performer sends word about a delayed train and is expected shortly. The habitual latecomer needs no dramatic reputation. The doorkeeper knows the habit because the same hand has entered the same late time on several mornings. This is the sort of knowledge a theatre gathers. It is made from minutes, parcels, missing gloves, worn cuffs, and repeated requests. It is less exciting than gossip and far more useful. You leave the repaired bodice on a padded hanger and begin your first round of the dressing rooms. A large wicker basket rests against your hip. Inside are strips of cotton tape, several labels, a notebook, and 2 cloth bags for small items. The rooms are quiet now. Their mirrors reflect uncovered windows and empty chairs rather than painted faces. The leading dressing room is on the more convenient side of the stage, near enough to shorten the journey to an important entrance. Its table has been wiped, though faint traces of powder remain at the edge of the wood. A glass stopper stands beside a folded towel. One costume has been left properly spread over the back of a chair so that the damp may escape. Another garment hangs from a peg by one narrow loop, pulling too much weight through too little tape. You lift it down at once. That single choice tells you something about the wearer, but not necessarily what an outsider would suppose. Carelessness with a costume does not prove carelessness in everything. The performer may have returned from the final curtain with only a few minutes before a train. The dresser may have been called elsewhere. A difficult change may have left the room out of order. One occurrence tells you very little. 20 occurrences form a working pattern. You examine the loop and mark it for reinforcement. In the next room, a pair of cuffs requires laundering. The collar has a grey line where face paint has met fabric. A velvet skirt shows pressure marks from sitting between entrances. The hem is clean, but the inner facing bears a row of fine scratches. You know their likely source before you finish turning the skirt. During the second act, the performer crosses near the edge of a rough-backed property chair. The audience sees polished wood. The skirt finds every projecting tack and uneven corner. Farther along, a sleeve button is missing. You locate it beneath the dressing table, place it in the small item bag, and record where it belongs. A glove has been left rolled into itself. A ribbon flower is crushed. A coat lining is damp across the shoulders, evidence not of private emotion but of heat, effort, and several minutes beneath strong stage lamps. Costumes record movement with remarkable accuracy. A singer who fills the chest deeply puts strain across certain seams. A performer who kneels in the same scene each day wears one patch of a skirt before the rest. A forceful gesture loosens shoulder trim. Quick turns pull at hems. Some hands open hooks gently. Others tug until thread yields. Some performers remember to empty their pockets. Others leave behind folded notices, handkerchiefs, or a harmless property letter from the previous night's scene. You learn these habits because cloth remembers them. The cleaners learn a different set. They know which dressing room leaves pins on the floor and which leaves every chair in place. The property staff know who returns an object directly to its marked table and who hands it to the nearest available person. The caller knows who answers at once and who requires a second warning. The prompter hears who has fully mastered a speech and who depends on the security of a familiar rhythm. No single worker sees the whole performer. Each sees the part that meets the worker's own task. This division of knowledge follows the theatre's chain of authority. At the top stands the actor-manager or the managing partnership, responsible for the production, the company, and the considerable financial risk of keeping a West End house open. An actor-manager may also take a leading role, combining artistic command with business authority. Below that office, the stage manager controls the working performance. Rehearsals, calls, entrances, scene changes, discipline, and the order by which dozens of separate actions become one evening's entertainment. Department heads govern their own territories. The master carpenter supervises scenery and the workers who shift it. Property staff account for the objects handled on stage. The musical director commands the orchestra. Those responsible for lighting follow a planned sequence while remaining alert to what actually occurs. In wardrobe, you oversee garments, alterations, repairs, issue, collection, and the dressers who assist performers before and during the play. Titles vary from theatre to theatre. Duties may overlap, especially when money is tight. A prosperous house can afford clearer divisions than a struggling one. Even here, however, no chart fully describes the work. When a fastening fails 3 minutes before an entrance, the question is not whether the repair sits neatly within a written hierarchy. The question is who has a needle, who has the authority to alter the garment, and who can finish before the call. Beneath the department heads are permanent hands, weekly workers, apprentices, and casual labor engaged for particular demands. A large production may require extra dressers, scene shifters, or attendants. A change in scenery can bring carpenters in early. A crowded stage can add supers for a procession or public scene. Their names may appear nowhere on the bill, though the scene depends on their positions being exact. Authority backstage is practical. It rests on timing, memory, and the ability to prevent one person's difficulty from becoming everyone's difficulty. You continue down the passage. In a smaller room shared by supporting performers, space is carefully divided. Each place has a chair, a section of table, and a set of hooks. Costumes are grouped by role and act. Labels matter here because similar white collars and dark waistcoats become indistinguishable when a passage is busy and the light is poor. One waistcoat has lost a button at the lower edge. A second is marked by repeated pulling near the armhole. You note both. On a chair lies a skirt with one side of the hem darker than the other. The wearer probably gathers it in the same hand when climbing the stairs from the stage. That action keeps the front clear, but brings the side against the wall. You could describe the performer as rough with clothing. That would be easy and unfair. The stairs are narrow, the turn is sharp, and the entrance follows quickly after a change. Better to ask whether the skirt can be shortened by ½ an inch without disturbing its line. Your work is not to assign fault where construction can supply an answer. At the end of the corridor, a dresser arrives and begins opening shutters. Together, you review the collection basket. 2 collars go to the outside laundry. A pair of gloves requires cleaning. 3 costumes need pressing. The missing sleeve button can be replaced at once. A torn length of lace must be matched from the wardrobe stock if any remains. The dresser mentions that one performer asked for a fastening to be moved after last night's show. You check the notebook. The request concerns a bodice used in a rapid change. The hook closes securely, but the performer's hand reaches to the old position by instinct. Moving it a little may save several seconds. That is another thing the staff know. Confidence is often built from small arrangements repeated until they require no conscious thought. The dresser places a shoe with its opening toward the performer. Gloves lie in the order they will be taken. A cloak is held so that both arms can enter cleanly. Fastenings close from the same direction each time. Alter the order without warning, and a smooth change becomes a search. Near the stage, the building has grown louder. The cleaners are lifting dust from the boards and from the narrow spaces beside the scenery. Experienced hands move carefully around chalk marks, ropes, and prepared objects. A painted interior stands upright in sections, convincing from the auditorium and plainly made of canvas, timber, and pigment from where you stand. The empty stage has none of the evening's distance. It is a workplace with numbered pieces. The stage manager crosses with papers under one arm. A rehearsal call has been posted for 11. Several entrances are to be adjusted, and one troublesome scene change will be repeated. This means the wardrobe must attend. If a performer takes a different path, climbs another stair, or waits in a narrower position, clothing may need alteration. You step onto the stage and look out into the empty auditorium. Without an audience, every seat seems to be watching. Dust hangs in the light near the upper boxes. The red upholstery is duller by morning. From the center of the boards, the house appears smaller than it does when filled with evening dress, programs, conversation, and applause. A porter carries a rolled carpet across the rear of the set. A carpenter tests the repaired hinge. At the stage door, the book continues to fill with arrival times. In the wardrobe room, the silk bodice waits with its closed seam. The theatre knows its performers in this fashion, by whether they answer a call, return a property, protect a costume, learn a changed entrance, and make room for another worker to complete a task. Such knowledge is not intimate in the private sense. It is professional, gathered through shared labor and verified by repetition. You turn away from the empty seats. There are cuffs to sort, labels to check, and a laundry list to prepare before the rehearsal begins. By evening, the audience will see finished characters moving through finished rooms. At 9 in the morning, you see the stitches, ledgers, broom marks, hinges, and human habits from which that finish will be made. By 10 o'clock, the wardrobe room has become a sorting office. The clothes gathered from the dressing rooms lie across a long table beneath the window. Nothing is thrown into a careless heap. Each piece has a place, and each defect calls for a different treatment. A cuff marked with face paint goes toward the laundry basket. A collar yellowed by heat must be replaced rather than merely brushed. Crushed velvet trim is lifted over steam. A loosened braid waits beside a card of matching thread. 2 wigs, returned in their wooden boxes, will go upstairs to the wig attendant for cleaning, dressing, and inspection. You begin with linen because the laundry parcel must leave soon. Stage linen leads a demanding life. Collars press against painted necks. Cuffs brush scenery, tables, and property letters. Shirt fronts are worn beneath hot costumes and strong light, then expected to appear clean at the next performance. Some pieces can be washed outside the theatre. Others must be treated within the wardrobe department because their pleats, lace, or coloured embroidery may not survive an ordinary laundry process. A dresser reads the labels while you check the list. 3 collars from the leading man's room, 2 pairs of cuffs from a supporting performer, 1 lace fichu from the second act, 4 handkerchiefs used as visible properties, a detachable muslin front from the matinee costume. Each article is counted out, examined, and entered before it leaves the building. The laundry must return the same number of pieces, preferably the same pieces. White linen can look interchangeable until a collar comes back half an inch too short or a cuff refuses to meet around the wrist for which it was fitted. A small difference becomes a large one when a dresser has only minutes to complete a change. Labels are therefore sewn where an audience will never see them. Some carry initials for a role rather than a performer because the costume belongs to the production. Others identify a particular wearer. A few pieces have colored threads worked into an inner edge, a simple code that remains readable when ink fades or a paper label comes loose. You run a finger along one collar and find the marking under the fold. It agrees with the ledger. The collar goes into the basket. The ledger itself is broad, heavy, and built for use rather than display. Its ruled pages divide garments into acts, scenes, roles, and wearers. Beside each item are short notes, altered at the shoulder, new hooks required, lace replaced, sent to laundry, returned from pressing. A costume that appears to the audience as one complete dress may occupy several lines: bodice, skirt, overskirt, belt, collar, pair of cuffs, brooch, gloves, fan. The list is not fussy bookkeeping. It is the memory of the department. A company may perform 6 evenings in a week, with 1 or more matinees added to the schedule. Garments move between dressing rooms, stage entrances, laundry baskets, pressing tables, storage cupboards, and outside workshops. Without written records, a missing sash might be blamed on a dresser who never received it. A hired cloak might be returned late and charged for another week. A pair of gloves might be sent away with the wrong parcel and discovered only when the call boy announces the half hour. You turn back several pages. The present production opened weeks ago, but the original ink is already surrounded by pencil amendments. A hem was raised after the first rehearsals. A bodice was let out slightly. One line notes that a set of decorative buttons was removed and replaced with flatter ones because they caught against a property chair. Another records that a pale trim looked weak under the stage light and was exchanged for a darker shade. Nothing on stage remains entirely fixed. The ledger shows the production learning how to work. Beside it lies the alteration book, smaller and easier to carry. This contains the immediate instructions gathered from rehearsals and performances. The dressers contribute observations. The stage manager may send a written request. A performer may report that a sleeve prevents a required movement. You decide whether the answer is a new seam, a stronger fastening, a change in trim, or merely a lesson in how the garment must be handled. Your decisions have a cost. A reel of silk thread, a length of braid, a packet of hooks, a replacement feather, and an hour of skilled labor may seem minor when considered separately. Across an entire company and a long run, they accumulate. The wardrobe account must explain why material was purchased and where it went. Receipts are folded into dated bundles. Bills from costumiers are checked against delivered goods. Payments to laundresses, pressers, dyers, shoemakers, and wig workers enter separate columns. The exact sums differ sharply from theatre to theatre. A prosperous West End house can spend freely on a leading production while still bargaining over ordinary departmental expenses. Surviving contracts and account books from the late 19th century show a theatrical world with no single standard wage. A junior worker might receive less than £1 for a full week's work. An experienced dresser or seamstress might earn wages counted in the upper range of shillings, depending on the season, the employer, and whether extra performances brought extra payment. A department head could earn more, though the responsibility extended beyond sewing into purchasing, supervision, fitting, storage, and the prevention of costly mistakes. Your own income is steadier than that of many performers, but steady does not mean secure. Employment follows the production. A successful run keeps the department occupied. A short run can scatter workers quickly. There is no guarantee that the next manager will retain the same staff or offer the same terms. Performers face an even wider range. A celebrated leading player may negotiate several pounds a week, sometimes much more when reputation, management interests, or a share of receipts enters the agreement. A modest supporting performer may receive only a few pounds. Those in small parts can earn considerably less, and weeks spent rehearsing or waiting between engagements press heavily on any savings. Public recognition does not always reveal private financial stability. A performer whose portrait appears in a shop window may still have to pay for lodging, meals, transport, shoes, gloves, lessons, photographs, and selected items of dress. This is where the wardrobe books offer a plain correction to the theatre bill. The bill presents names in carefully arranged type. The ledger records who receives new cloth, who wears an altered garment from an earlier production, and who is told to provide suitable boots from home. Billing describes public rank. Wardrobe expenditure shows how that rank is supported in practice. Not every costume in the building belongs to the theatre. Some garments are made for the production and remain the property of management. These are entered as stock when the run closes and may later be recut for another play. Military coats, servants' liveries, cloaks, simple skirts, waistcoats, and character garments can pass through several productions. A good piece of stage clothing is rarely discarded merely because its first role has ended. Buttons change, braid comes off, sleeves are narrowed. A skirt is turned, dyed, retrimmed, and given another life. More elaborate garments may be hired from a theatrical costumier. The hire agreement matters. It identifies the pieces, the period of use, the weekly or monthly charge, and the condition in which they must be returned. Permanent alteration may be forbidden. If a hired bodice must fit a performer more closely, you look for a reversible solution. Hidden tucks, temporary guards, and replaceable fastenings allow the garment to serve the present wearer without damaging the costumer's property. Performers may also be expected to supply personal items. Men are often required to provide ordinary evening clothes, boots, gloves, or shirts suitable to the part. Women may be asked for shoes, stockings, underlinen, gloves, or a fashionable dress, especially when management believes such clothing already belongs to a performer's working wardrobe. The practice transfers expense away from the theatre, but it favors those who can afford to arrive well-equipped. A performer with limited means may maintain one dependable pair of stage shoes through repeated repairs. Another may possess several gowns that can be adapted with little expense to management. Talent is not measured in gloves or polished boots, yet access to the right objects can affect which parts seem possible. You see this inequality before the audience does. The leading woman's first act dress has been made to her measurements. Its color was selected with the scenery and lighting in mind. Spare trim remains in the wardrobe cupboard for repairs. Her evening gloves arrive by the box, charged to the production. A performer in a smaller role wears a bodice taken from stock. The side seams have been opened as far as their allowances permit. The sleeves came from another garment and do not quite match beneath daylight, though they will appear convincing from the stalls. Her skirt has served in at least 2 earlier plays. The hem bears a faint line where a different length was once pressed. This does not mean the smaller roll is neglected. You fit it as well as the materials allow. A poor fastening can delay an entrance no matter whose name appears on the bill, yet the order of attention is clear. When time, money, and skilled hands are limited, the leading costumes receive them first. The allocation is visible in the paper trail. New fabric appears beside one roll, stock alteration appears beside another. A third line reads, "Performer's own shoes." 4 words shift the cost from management to the person wearing them. The same hierarchy governs repairs. A damaged leading gown may be taken apart at once, with 2 workers assigned to it. A strained seam in a crowd costume is secured quickly and returned to the rail. Both must hold. Only one is expected to reward close inspection through opera glasses or attract comment in the newspapers. You close the main ledger and open the deposit book. This records items lent into individual keeping, jewelry made for the stage, special buckles, decorated combs, fans, purses, and other small articles liable to travel accidentally into a pocket or dressing bag. The objects may be inexpensive imitations, but replacing them during a run wastes time. A signature, mark, or dresser's acknowledgement shows who received each piece. On the table, the damaged cuffs have now been separated from those needing only washing. The crushed trim has risen under careful steaming. A dresser has wrapped the 2 wigs for their journey upstairs. Near the door, the laundry basket is covered and tied, with its written count secured beneath the cord. Before it leaves, you count everything once more. The task has none of the glamour promised by the playbill, yet it tells you more about the company than a column of theatrical chatter. You know which performer needs fresh collars kept in reserve. You know whose costume requires stronger thread at the armhole. You know which role has a hired cloak, which has management silk, and which depends upon the performer's own boots. You know where money has been spent, where it has been saved, and where skilled labor has made saving possible. These are not judgments upon anyone's private character. They are facts about the work. A performer who cares for a borrowed garment makes the next performance easier for the dresser. One who reports a loose fastening early gives you time to mend it properly. Someone who returns every glove and ornament to its marked place protects the entire sequence of the next show. Such habits rarely reach the audience, but they enter the staff's understanding as surely as any line in the book. From the stage comes the scrape of furniture being moved into rehearsal position. A voice carries through the passage, asking whether wardrobe is ready to attend. You place the alteration book beneath your arm. The dresser carries a pincushion, chalk, and measuring tape. Behind you, the laundry parcel departs through the service corridor, every collar and cuff accounted for. Ahead, the empty auditorium waits beneath its dim morning lights. The rehearsal call is about to be given, and the neat instructions in your book will soon be tested against moving bodies, narrow stairs, changed entrances, and the unforgiving count of the clock. At 11 o'clock, the stage manager stands near the footlights with a prompt copy open in one hand and a pencil in the other. The company gathers without ceremony. A few performers sit in the front row of the stalls, hats and coats beside them. Others wait on stage among chairs that represent drawing room furniture but have not yet been placed exactly. The leading performer speaks quietly with the actor-manager. An understudy studies a page at the edge of the group. There is no scenery beyond the pieces required for the altered transitions. The house curtain is raised, the borders hang overhead, and the stage floor shows its working marks. Chalk lines, screw holes, worn tracks, and numbered positions that the evening audience will never see. You enter through the side passage with the dresser behind you. From the stalls, the theatre looks larger and barer than it does during a performance. Rows of empty seats slope away into shadow. The gilt fronts of the boxes catch what little light reaches them. Voices that seem pleasantly measured before an audience now return from the vacant auditorium with a thin echo. The stage manager calls for the opening of the second act. A carpenter sets a door flat into position. Property staff place a writing desk and 2 chairs. A member of the call staff waits beside the prompt corner, ready to carry instructions into the passages and dressing rooms. The musicians are not all present, though the rehearsal pianist sits at a smaller instrument and prepares to supply the necessary bars. The purpose of this morning's call is not to repeat the play from beginning to end. Several entrances have been altered. A scene change took too long at the matinee 2 days ago. One performer has been asked to cross farther downstage before delivering an important line, while another must pause near the fireplace so that the audience in the side boxes can see the exchange. These changes sound small when spoken aloud. In practice, each one travels through the building. A different cross may place a skirt against the corner of a table. A longer pause may delay the next call. A revised entrance may leave less time for a change of coat. If a performer now climbs 3 steps instead of walking through the central door, the hem that passed safely over a level floor must be reconsidered. The stage manager alters the prompt copy. The property worker shifts a chair. The carpenter checks the path of the door. You watch the clothing. The scene begins. Without finished costume, music, or applause, acting becomes visibly mechanical in the best sense of the word. The performers count steps. They measure pauses. They test how far a voice must travel and where a turn will allow the next line to be heard clearly. A polished entrance that may appear spontaneous in the evening is taken apart into position, breath, direction, and timing. One performer crosses too early. Again from the preceding line, says the stage manager. The company returns to its marks. No one treats the repetition as unusual. A line begins. A hand reaches for the back of a chair. The crossing starts later this time, but the performer arrives with the body angled away from the stalls. Once more. The pencil moves across the prompt copy. The actor manager offers a brief instruction about the intention of the exchange. The performer nods, walks back, and waits. On the third attempt, the movement fits. The line reaches the auditorium. The other performer has room to answer. The hand finds the chair at precisely the right instant, and the altered entrance follows without a gap. This is what the staff see that the audience generally does not. Performance is not a mysterious quality placed upon a person at birth and carried effortlessly into the light. It is built through correction. The breath is managed so that a sentence can be completed after a quick crossing. The body learns where furniture stands even when the eye is directed toward another performer. The ear listens for a musical phrase, a spoken word, or the sound of a door closing beyond the scenery. Spatial memory matters as much as memory for lines. A stage is crowded with things that must be found without obvious searching. A letter waits on one corner of the desk. A bell pull hangs within reach of a marked position. A glove must be placed where the next scene requires it. Behind the painted walls are narrow lanes used by dressers, callers, property workers, and performers preparing to enter. One uncertain step can interrupt several departments at once. The stage manager's authority rests upon this coordination. Under the actor-manager system, the actor-manager may choose the play, control casting, shape the interpretation, and appear in a principal role. During rehearsal, however, the stage manager turns broad decisions into a repeatable order. Calls must be issued, entrances fixed, scene changes measured, and warnings delivered in time. The prompt copy serves as the record of that order. It begins with the printed or written text, but it does not remain a clean literary object. Its margins collect practical instructions. A line may be marked as the warning for a property. Another signals music. An entrance is noted by side and position. Scene changes, curtain movements, calls, pauses, and later corrections enter the book in a hand meant to be understood under pressure. If the production travels, a reliable prompt copy helps preserve the arrangement in a different theatre where passages, doors, and stage dimensions may not match those in London. If another person must take over the book, clear marks allow the sequence to continue. The copy is not merely the play, it is the play as this company has made it, with every visible effect tied to work performed out of sight. Written calls provide a second form of order. Rehearsal notices may be posted where company members can read the hour and the scenes required. Individual messages can also be carried through the stage door office or delivered by call staff. A performer appearing for only part of the rehearsal need not wait from the beginning, provided the call is accurate and the performer arrives when expected. That proviso matters. Time in a theatre is shared property. A late arrival does not inconvenience only the stage manager. It may hold a pianist at the instrument, keep carpenters from resetting a scene, delay a fitter with other garments waiting, and prevent a supporting performer from leaving for another appointment. Staff remember habitual lateness because they must absorb its cost in minutes and rearranged work. They remember punctuality for the same reason. The understudy at the side of the stage now rises to follow an entrance. An understudy's duty is not simply to learn the printed words. The movements, pauses, properties, and relationships of the scene must also be known. Depending upon the company and contract, an understudy may hold a smaller role while remaining prepared to assume a larger one. Rehearsal time for that second responsibility can be limited, which makes close observation necessary. From your place near the wing, you can tell when observation has been exact. The understudy steps around the table rather than across the path needed by the next entrance. The letter is lifted with the correct hand. At the final line, the body turns toward the proper door before the call is given. The carpenter notices something else. The door closes too slowly behind the understudy. The property worker notices that the letter has been folded after it was picked up, though it must later lie flat on the desk. The rehearsal pianist hears the spoken passage quicken and adjusts the approach to the next musical cue. You see that the borrowed jacket pulls across the shoulders when the arm reaches forward. Each department recognizes preparation through its own evidence. The stage manager hears the whole sequence. The carpenter watches paths and obstacles. Property staff follow objects. Musicians attend to tempo, phrasing, and entry. Wardrobe follows the way cloth responds to movement. Uncertainty also has a different appearance from each position. To the caller, it may mean a performer asking twice whether the entrance follows a particular line. To the property worker, it is a hand reaching toward the wrong side of a table. To you, it may be a performer tugging repeatedly at a cuff because the sleeve has not settled correctly. Such signs do not necessarily indicate carelessness. A new movement may not yet have entered the body's memory. A garment may resist a gesture that worked perfectly in rehearsal clothes. A long speech may require a different breath once the performer has crossed the stage. The staff learn not merely who hesitates, but why. The scene is called again, this time with the altered movement leading directly into a change. A supporting performer leaves through the stage right door and must return shortly in a different skirt and jacket. The dresser follows the route with her eyes. You count the interval from the exit line to the next warning. It is shorter than before. In the wardrobe passage, speed does not come from frantic movement. It comes from removing decisions. Hooks are opened in advance where possible. The replacement garment is laid in order. Fastenings begin from the same point each time. Gloves are turned correctly. A hat pin waits beside the hat rather than beneath it. Performer and dresser stand in agreed positions so that neither blocks the other. The revised exit changes that arrangement. The performer will now reach the change from another side after crossing a narrow stair. The skirt worn in the first part of the scene has a train suitable for its visual effect, but not suitable for a hurried descent. You ask for the movement to be repeated. The stage manager agrees. The performer takes the line, turns, and leaves. You follow far enough to see the skirt meet the first step. The hand gathers it, but that action occupies the same hand needed to open the passage door. In performance, under stronger light and with the pace of the scene behind it, the delay will be greater. The hem needs to rise, not by much. A large alteration would disturb the shape of the skirt and make the front appear too short. You mark a modest change at the back and note that the inner support must be secured so it cannot drop below the outer fabric. The dresser adds a chalk mark where the fold can be taken. The fastening also deserves attention. At present, it closes at the center back with a row of hooks and eyes. The dresser can manage them, but the new timing leaves little allowance for one bent hook or a layer caught beneath another. Moving part of the opening toward the side will make the garment easier to release and replace. A concealed arrangement beneath the trim can preserve its appearance from the auditorium. The performer stands while you test the proposed position with 2 pins. There is no discussion of personality, vanity, or private habit. The questions are direct. Can the arm lift freely? Does the waist remain firm when the performer turns? Can the dresser reach the closure without forcing the fabric? Will the alteration be hidden from the front rows? Another rehearsal begins before you have finished writing the note. The company now runs the troublesome transition without stopping. A final line is spoken. The curtain movement is called. 2 pieces of furniture leave by separate paths. The writing desk turns just enough to clear the doorway. The understudy waits beyond the wing. A carpenter catches a wall section and guides it into place. The pianist supplies the opening phrase of the next scene. For several seconds, the stage seems crowded with unrelated actions. Then each action finds its proper count. The old scene disappears, the new entrance occurs, and the first line lands in a cleared space. The stage manager checks the watch. The transition is quicker. There will be another attempt because quicker is useful only if it remains orderly. A rushed change that damages a property, catches a costume, or leaves a worker in the wrong passage gains nothing. Theatre timing is not speed for its own sake. It is the removal of wasted motion while protecting every necessary motion that remains. You return to the wardrobe table at the side of the stage. In the alteration book, you write instructions for the shortened skirt, the secured inner support, and the moved fastening. Beside them, you add the reason: new stair exit, faster change. That reason may matter tonight or a week from now when someone asks why the garment differs from the original inventory. Paper preserves the decision after the rehearsal has vanished into memory. On stage, the company takes its places again. The actor manager looks toward the stage manager. The caller waits for the signal. The carpenter rests a hand against the door flat. The property letter lies squarely on the desk. You close the alteration book but keep the pencil ready. The polished performance is still hours away. For now, the theatre shows its working face, and every repeated line, counted step, shifted chair, and chalk term brings the evening's apparent ease a little closer. At noon, the rehearsal breaks apart into separate errands. A carpenter carries the troublesome door flat toward the scene dock. The property assistant retrieves the letter from the desk. Performers gather scripts, compare call times, and make their way toward the dressing room stairs. You take the alteration book upstairs, where the fitting room is ready for its next kind of rehearsal. Daylight enters through a high window, though not enough to make the gas bracket unnecessary on a grey autumn afternoon. A long table stands beneath the light. Chalk, pins, scissors, black thread, white thread, tape, hooks, eyes, and narrow strips of whalebone are arranged within reach. Beside the table waits a treadle sewing machine. A full-length mirror occupies one wall, its glass marked by years of wiping. Costumes hang from hooks with muslin covers protecting the pale fabrics from dust. The dresser has already brought in the skirt altered during rehearsal. You open the alteration book and read your own note once more. The hem must rise at the front, though not so much that the line appears uneven from the stalls. The inner support needs securing. One fastening must move far enough to save several seconds during the change. The performer arrives carrying the bodice over one arm. She is punctual, which saves everyone from working against the clock. Her outdoor jacket comes off and is placed on a chair. The dresser helps her into the skirt while you keep the chalk and tape ready. A fitting is not a leisurely examination of fashion. It is a series of tests. Stand straight, turn, lift the right arm, cross to the mirror, take 3 quick steps, mount the wooden fitting block as if it were the first stair. Turn again. The dresser kneels near the hem, pinning the new line while keeping the points turned inward. You watch the skirt in motion rather than at rest. When the performer stands still, the folds appear satisfactory. When she climbs, the front catches against the toe of her shoe. Half an inch more must come away. You mark the place in chalk. This is one of the differences between a fashionable dress and a working stage costume. A dress made for a drawing room may be judged while its wearer sits, stands, and walks at a measured pace. A stage garment must survive repeated entrances, broad gestures, quick turns, stairs, furniture, crowded wings, and changes performed against a call. It must also read clearly from the back of a large auditorium. The audience does not see the small compromise at the hem. It sees a clean exit. The performer steps down. You test the waistband with 2 fingers and examine the strain near the side closure. The outer silk is decorative, but beneath it lies the real structure. A firm cotton foundation, shaped seams, tapes, and supports, placed where they can carry repeated pulling without asking the visible fabric to do all the work. Late Victorian stage dress often resembles current fashion without copying it exactly. The outline must be recognizable at once, particularly in a modern comedy or domestic drama. Yet a garment made only according to fashionable standards may fail under theatrical use. Stage clothing is strengthened where ordinary clothing would remain light. Seams are reinforced. Closures are enlarged or rearranged. Decoration is attached so that damaged pieces can be removed without rebuilding the whole dress. A strip of lace may look as though it has always belonged to a bodice. In the workroom, it is often a replaceable part secured with careful stitches. A spray of artificial flowers may be fixed to a pin or a small stitched base. If it is crushed during a performance, another can take its place before the next curtain. Dark braid may cover a repaired edge. Beads can be attached in short sections so that one broken thread does not release an entire row. Durability has its own appearance, though the audience is not meant to notice it. You ask the performer to repeat the turn. This time the skirt clears the fitting block. The dresser makes a second chalk mark, then begins removing the pins one by one so the garment can come off safely. The next test concerns the bodice. Its rear fastening is respectable for ordinary wear, but too slow for the change now required. You examine the row of small hooks. Neat as they are, they demand time and steady light. Neither is plentiful in a narrow dressing room between scenes. The visible row can remain. A concealed fastening beneath it will perform the actual work. You explain the change in a few sentences. The performer listens, asks whether the bodice will sit differently at the waist, and accepts the answer when you show where the inner band will lie. This exchange is part of the fitting. You control the construction, but she must work inside it. If the fastening feels uncertain, she may hesitate during the change. If the sleeve restricts her reach, the restriction will appear in every gesture. Authority in this room is divided by task. The performer knows what movement the role requires. You know what the garment can bear. The dresser knows how it behaves under the pressure of an actual change. A useful fitting brings those three kinds of knowledge together. The dresser helps remove the bodice. You inspect its lining and dictate a short note. The inner band will be replaced. 2 hooks will be moved. The right sleeve requires a little more freedom at the back of the arm. The performer retrieves her jacket and leaves for a brief meal. Her manner has been exact and economical. You have learned something about her working method, but not some grand truth about her private character. She tests what matters, asks direct questions, and does not prolong a decision once the practical point is settled. That is enough knowledge for the wardrobe room. The distinction matters because fittings place staff close to the objects through which performers create a public image. You know waist measurements, shoe sizes, preferred sleeve lengths, and which closure can be managed quickly. You see garments before decoration hides their repairs. You may know that a grand train is supported by plain tape, or that an impressive panel has been pieced from fabric left after an earlier production. None of this grants ownership over the person wearing it. The professional boundary is maintained through routine. The dresser announces each pin. You ask before changing the set of a collar or tightening an inner band. Measurements are written in departmental books rather than passed around as conversation. Remarks remain attached to the work. The sleeve draws when the arm rises, the shoe slips during a turn, the hat needs another pin, the cuff catches on the property bag. Such habits protect efficiency as much as courtesy. A fitting filled with personal observation would take twice as long and produce half the useful information. The second performer is called in. Her costume belongs to a supporting role and has already served in another production. The original label remains inside the bodice, crossed through but still readable. A newer strip of cotton tape carries the present role and scene. The dress is sound, though its first purpose can be detected in the cut. The sleeves have been changed. A band of velvet disguises the old stitching at the neck. The skirt has enough cloth to permit adjustment, which is one reason theatrical wardrobes preserve generous seams whenever possible. You fit the bodice at the shoulders. The performer stands with one shoulder slightly forward, not from carelessness, but because the role requires her to carry a closed parasol under that arm during part of the scene. When the parasol is placed in her hand, the reason becomes visible. The sleeve binds near the back. You do not tell her to correct her posture. You mark the sleeve. Working dress must follow working movement. Clothing historians can reconstruct many fashionable silhouettes from surviving garments, plates, photographs, and dressmaking manuals. Stage costume leaves a more altered record. A theatre may use a garment, cut it down, add to it, dye it, trim it again, and assign it to a new performer. What survives is sometimes less a single dress than a collection of decisions made over several seasons. The wardrobe book provides the missing sequence: blue skirt relined, velvet cuffs renewed, lace removed after the spring tour, waist enlarged, train shortened, trim transferred to another bodice. Each entry appears small. Together they show an economy based on reuse. Fabric is valuable, skilled sewing takes time, and a management facing weekly expenses cannot order an entirely new wardrobe whenever a supporting part changes hands. Leading performers may have garments designed for them, particularly when their names help sell the production. Smaller roles are more often supplied through alteration, hired stock, or pieces drawn from the theatre's own stores. Yet adaptation does not mean carelessness. A supporting performer still needs a secure hem, a usable pocket if the action requires one, and a fastening that will not delay an entrance. Rank influences the cost of the cloth and the amount of new work approved. It must not be allowed to weaken the performance. You let out a narrow section at the back of the sleeve and pin it temporarily. The performer raises the parasol again. This time, the bodice remains smooth. She smiles at the mirror, not because the change is visible, but because the resistance has gone. A third fitting follows. This one concerns a coat worn for only a few minutes. From the auditorium, it will appear heavy and expensive. Close at hand, you can see how the effect is made. The cloth is respectable but not of the finest grade. The collar carries most of the visual weight. Dark velvet, a bold line at the front, and bright buttons catch the stage light. The back is cut to hang cleanly rather than to provide warmth. Stage costume is read by distance. Fine handwork that delights at arm's length may disappear beyond the footlights. Broad contrast survives, a firm outline survives. A pale cuff against a dark sleeve tells the eye where the hand ends. A bright ornament placed too low may draw attention away from the face. A weak color may flatten beneath strong illumination, while a shade that looks excessive in daylight settles into balance on stage. You have learned not to judge the finished effect from the fitting room alone. The garment must be seen beneath the theatre's own light, beside painted scenery, and at the distance of the stalls. Even the color of a wall flat can alter the impression. A reddish fabric near warm scenery may lose definition. A pale dress against a pale interior may need a darker belt, collar, or line of trim to restore its shape. The performer tries the coat over the costume. You check the shoulders, then the pockets. One is real, the other only suggested by trim. The real pocket must hold a folded paper used in the second act. It is deep enough, but the opening faces backward and slows the hand. You unpick several temporary stitches and angle the opening slightly forward. Again, posture offers information. Some performers keep their arms close to the body and prefer narrow sleeves. Others need room for open gestures. One relies on a dresser to close every fastening. Another wants to manage the final hook personally. Some ask that shoes be placed with toes toward the door. Some want gloves laid across the costume rather than beside it. These choices do not prove vanity, kindness, selfishness, or courage. They show methods. Theatre workers become skilled at keeping the difference clear. A repeated habit may reveal how a performer prepares. It does not explain the whole person. The coat is removed and returned to its hanger. You attach a paper ticket noting the pocket alteration and the scene in which it is required. The dresser carries the garment to the work table. Around you, the room has filled with evidence of decisions made in less than an hour. White chalk along a hem, pins at a sleeve head, a loose lining turned outward, replacement hooks in a saucer, and 3 written entries waiting to become stitches. The hall clock sounds the hour. There is little time before the theatre begins changing from a rehearsal building into a matinee house. You gather the altered pieces in order of urgency. The skirt comes first because it is needed for the opening act. The bodice follows. The sleeve and pocket can be completed while the early scenes are underway. The performer's polished outline will later seem complete from the instant she enters. Here, at noon, you know it as a set of practical questions answered with tape, chalk, strong thread, and judgment. You settle at the sewing machine and place the skirt beneath the presser foot. Outside the fitting room, footsteps move toward the stage door. Parcels are arriving, messages are being sorted. The afternoon papers have begun to appear. You lower the needle into the marked hem and the fitting room returns to work. By 1 o'clock, the new hem is secure. You cut the thread, lift the skirt from the machine, and shake the folds free. The shortened edge appears unremarkable, which is exactly what good alteration should achieve. No audience will notice the line of stitching. They may notice only that the performer reaches the top of the stairs without checking her step. You pass the skirt to the dresser for pressing and wash the chalk from your fingers. Lunch waits in a covered bowl beside the work table brought from a nearby eating house before noon. It is a serving of meat pie with potatoes, no longer hot but still welcome. You carry it toward the stage door passage, where the air is cooler and the traffic of the theatre can be watched between mouthfuls. The stage door is not grand. It has none of the polished promise of the main entrance, with its lamps, printed bills, and attendants. This door opens onto work. Its step is worn, its paint has been marked by parcels, and a narrow office beside it contains a desk, a clock, pigeonholes, registers, and enough pencils to manage several hundred small interruptions. The stage doorkeeper sits behind the desk. Anyone entering here must pass within sight of that chair. At this hour, the traffic comes in waves. A boy from the costumier arrives with a parcel tied in cord. A messenger brings flowers wrapped in paper. 2 afternoon newspapers are pushed across the desk. A tradesman delivers a box of gloves. Another parcel contains a length of black braid ordered yesterday, though the invoice gives the wrong width. The doorkeeper does not merely open and close a door. Every arrival must be judged and directed. Company members are recognized. Casual workers give their purpose. Parcels are entered, messages placed in the proper pigeonhole, and callers asked to wait while their business is checked. The distinction is not between interesting visitors and uninteresting ones. It is between people who belong to the working day and people who might delay it. A note from management travels upstairs at once. A personal letter can wait. Fresh costume material is sent to you. A newspaper is placed with the other press notices. Flowers may be delivered to a dressing room, but not if receiving them requires a performer to abandon a call. A tradesman seeking payment is directed toward the office, where the clerk will know whether the account has been approved. The doorkeeper knows the building by names, roles, destinations, and habits. He knows which musician always carries a narrow black case, and which dresser arrives with her sewing bag under one arm. He recognizes the newspaper representative who has arranged an appointment and the messenger who delivers without needing to be reminded where to sign. He also knows that a familiar face does not grant unlimited access. Theatres attract curiosity. The public entrance sells admission to the performance, not to the working passages behind it. Someone who wishes to leave a message may do so. Someone claiming urgent business may be asked to state that business clearly. A visitor expected by a company member can be announced, but the company member must decide whether to receive the call. This control protects more than privacy. It protects time. A matinee depends upon dozens of people reaching appointed places in a fixed sequence. A 5-minute conversation at the door may seem harmless. Yet if it delays a fitting, the fitting delays the dresser delays the costume change, and the costume change may affect an entrance. The doorkeeper therefore guards the schedule before the stage manager ever gives a formal call. You finish the potatoes and turn your attention to the parcel from the costumier. The cord has been knotted tightly. Inside, beneath brown paper, lies the replacement braid and a short note explaining that the requested width was unavailable until tomorrow. The substitute is close, but not close enough. From the stalls, the difference might pass unnoticed. Under strong stage light, beside the existing trim, it will look heavier and absorb more light. You measure it against a sample kept in the wardrobe book. Then write that the parcel is to remain unopened beyond inspection and should be exchanged. The stage doorkeeper records the instruction before placing it aside for collection. Such exchanges occur constantly during a run. Stage costume consumes ribbon, braid, lace, buttons, hooks, eyes, cord, feathers, flowers, gloves, stockings, and pieces of fabric too small to appear impressive on an invoice. Each item may cost little alone. Together, they form a steady drain on the production account. Publicity works in a similar way. A single notice, photograph, or printed bill may seem like a small object. Repeated across a city, these objects build the version of a performer known beyond the theatre. The large bill outside gives billing order as carefully as it gives the title of the play. The leading names appear in type suited to their contractual standing. Supporting performers follow in smaller letters. Some roles receive special mention, others appear only in the full program, and the least visible workers are absent altogether. A name's position on the bill is not simply decorative, it is a statement about rank, drawing power, negotiation, and management's belief about what will sell seats. If two names are printed at the same size, their order may still matter. If a performer has secured special billing by contract, the printer must follow it. The page becomes another form of company hierarchy, readable from across the pavement. Advance notices prepare the audience before anyone has seen the production. They describe new scenery, fine costumes, popular performers, and the scale of the coming engagement. A carefully arranged photograph fixes a particular pose in the public mind. The performer stands beneath controlled light, wearing a costume that has been adjusted for the camera rather than for movement. The resulting image may be sold, displayed, or reproduced in an illustrated paper. Nothing in it shows the row of spare hooks sewn inside the bodice. A review offers a different construction. The critic chooses a few moments from an entire performance and gives them permanence in print. A favorable line may be quoted in advertisements. A reservation may be ignored. The public identity of the performer is assembled from selected entrances, selected photographs, selected sentences, and the prominent placing of a name. Downstairs, staff use other measures. You ask whether the performer arrived in time to dress without haste. The stage manager asks whether she knows the altered entrance. The prompter listens for readiness at the queue. The property worker notices whether an object is returned to the marked table. The dresser knows whether gloves are placed where they can be found again. The doorkeeper records whether the expected arrival occurred before the call. These measurements rarely appear in print, but they determine whether the printed promise can be kept. The theatre staff do not necessarily agree about every performer. Each department sees a different part of the working method. A musician may value steady tempo. A carpenter values clear movement during a scene change. You notice whether a garment is handed back rather than dropped, and whether an alteration request is made early enough to be completed properly. Preparedness does not always look the same. One performer arrives well before the half hour and settles quietly with the script. Another reaches the theatre later but dresses with such consistent order that no cue is threatened. One speaks little before going on. Another tests lines aloud, not from uncertainty, but because sound is part of preparation. Voice conservation is also visible without being mysterious. A performer facing two houses in one day may avoid shouting across passages. Messages are carried rather than called. Conversation is shortened. Warm drinks appear in dressing rooms. The staff do not need to diagnose the voice or speculate about private feeling. They need only recognize a practical effort to preserve what the performance requires. The stage door clock moves past 1. A flower delivery is waiting on the corner of the desk. Its paper has been folded back just enough to reveal pale chrysanthemums. The attached card is checked for the intended recipient, then placed with the flowers in a safe position away from damp coats and passing elbows. Flowers belong to the public language of the theatre. They can mark admiration, congratulations, friendship, or professional courtesy. Their arrival may be noted by the person at the door, but the meaning of every bouquet is not for the staff to invent. The useful facts are simpler. It has arrived. It bears a name. It must reach the right dressing room without blocking the passage or damaging a costume. A small crowd of company members begins to pass the desk. The earlier stillness has gone. Boots sound on the floorboards. A performer hands over a folded newspaper clipping for the management office. A musician enters carrying both instrument and lunch. 2 supers arrive together and sign where directed. The wig assistant brings a covered box held level in both hands. You return to the workroom with the newspapers and the replacement braid under your arm. One paper contains an advertisement for the afternoon performance. The theatre's name is bold, the hour is clear. The leading performers occupy the most noticeable line. Elsewhere on the page are railway notices, patent medicines, restaurant advertisements, lectures, sales, and competing entertainments. A theatre does not present its production in an empty city. It competes for attention with music halls, exhibitions, concerts, shops, restaurants, and other playhouses. Publicity must remind potential patrons not only that the performance exists, but that seats can be purchased today. The prosperous West End theatre has several means of doing this. Bills are posted, programs circulate. Photographs place familiar faces in shop windows. Notices are supplied to newspapers. Reviews are clipped and reused. The front of the building, especially after dark, makes its own announcement through light and movement. Inside, however, publicity cannot shorten a hem or place a glove in a waiting hand. You set the incorrect braid aside and check the repair order. The opening skirt has been pressed. The bodice fastening is secure. The sleeve can be completed during the first act if necessary, though you would prefer to finish it now. The pocket alteration has already been marked and threaded. A bell sounds in the passage. It is not yet the half-hour call. This first notice belongs to the practical preparation before it. Dressers collect the pieces needed in their rooms. The property department confirms that tables have been set. Musicians begin moving toward their places. The front-of-house staff arrange programs and check doors between the public corridors and the auditorium. At the main entrance, attendants will soon receive an audience that sees none of this movement. To them, the theatre will appear ready because the doors open at the advertised time. The stage doorkeeper's register shows how readiness has been assembled. Names have been checked. Messages have been sent. Parcels have reached departments. Visitors have been stopped or admitted according to purpose. Those who tend to arrive late are being watched for, not as a matter of gossip, but because an empty dressing room can become a production problem. The first formal matinee call travels along the passages. "Half hour, please." The words are repeated at each required door. A dresser answers. A performer acknowledges. Somewhere above, a member of the stage staff continues along the corridor, carrying the call from room to room. You hear chairs move and wardrobe doors open. Conversation changes in tone. The building is no longer preparing in a general way. It is counting down. The newspapers are folded and placed aside. The flowers have gone upstairs. The rejected braid waits for return. On your work table, the last repairs stand in performance order. You pick up the bodice, test its fastening once more, and carry it toward the dressing room passage. Behind you, the stage door opens for another arrival and closes firmly against the autumn air. By 2 o'clock, the public side of the theatre has begun to fill. From the dressing room passage, you cannot yet see the arriving carriages or the people stepping down beneath the entrance canopy. You hear them indirectly. The outer doors open more often. The bell in the box office window sounds. Footsteps collect in the vestibule where the air carries damp wool, perfume, leather gloves, and the faint smoke of the street. At the front of the house, attendants stand in assigned positions. One examines tickets, another directs patrons toward the stalls and boxes. Program sellers hold thin paper booklets printed with the cast, the order of scenes, and advertisements for restaurants, dressmakers, patent medicines, and forthcoming attractions. The theatre is one building, but its audience does not enter it as one body. A patron with a private box may be led through a quieter corridor and shown to a small enclosed space overlooking the stage. Those holding stalls tickets proceed to the upholstered seats on the main floor. Above them, the dress circle offers a clear view and carries its own expectations of clothing and conduct. Farther back or higher up come the less costly sections, the pit, upper circle, and gallery, depending on the arrangement and terminology of the house. These divisions are not merely architectural. They are a plan of Victorian income and status made visible in wood, plaster, velvet, and numbered seats. At a prosperous West End theatre, one of the best seats might cost around half a guinea, or 10 shillings and sixpence. A gallery place might be available for about a shilling, though prices vary from theatre to theatre and from production to production. The difference represents more than a better view. It may equal a substantial part of a lower-paid worker's weekly earnings. The expensive ticket buys space, comfort, and a measure of visibility. A box allows its occupants to watch the stage while also being watched by much of the house. The gallery offers height, crowding, and distance, but it also has its own experienced audience. Those seated there may recognize a weak scene, a delayed entrance, or an old stage trick as readily as anyone below. Staff members at the front know these audiences by habit. The box office clerk sees which performances sell quickly and which require stronger advertising. The clerk knows when a particular name on the bill draws early bookings, when a favorable notice brings a rush of inquiries, and when a run is being supported by discounted arrangements or organized parties. An usher notices different evidence. Repeat visitors no longer need directions. Some patrons arrive at nearly the same time for every matinee. Some choose seats close to an exit. Others study the program before the curtain rises, comparing the cast against a previous visit. A late arrival may stand at the back until a suitable break, rather than being allowed to disturb an important scene. Through closed auditorium doors, the front-of-house staff hear the performance without seeing it. They learn the shape of the play through sound. They recognize the point at which laughter usually comes, the silence before an important speech, and the applause that follows a well-known entrance. If applause weakens over several days, they notice. If it grows after a favorable newspaper notice, they notice that too. Their knowledge is practical and incomplete, but repeated performances give it weight. A box office total cannot explain every response, and applause cannot measure every kind of acting. Yet together, these small observations tell the management whether the public is arriving, returning, and recommending the production to others. Backstage, your measurements are different. You judge a performer by whether the requested sleeve allows the required reach. You remember who places gloves in the proper tray and who leaves them beneath a chair. You know whose costume must be ready earlier because its fastening takes longer, and whose first entrance is so late that dressing can proceed without haste. The audience may discuss charm, presence, elegance, or natural ease. You deal in punctuality, preparation, and repeatable action. At 2:15, you enter one of the principal dressing rooms carrying the bodice repaired downstairs. The performer is seated before the mirror, with a cloth protecting the gown beneath the face paint. The dresser has already arranged the objects needed for the first act. Hairpins lie in a shallow dish. Gloves rest together, fingers straightened. A small piece of jewelry has been checked against the wardrobe list. Shoes stand beneath the chair with their fastenings open. Nothing is placed casually. The order on the table follows the order in which it will be used. You fit the repaired bodice into place and close it from the lower fastening upward. The reinforced point sits properly now. You ask for one full breath and then a turn of the shoulders. The fabric holds without pulling. The alteration is successful not because it looks neat at arm's length, but because it survives movement. That is the backstage standard. A repair must pass unnoticed by the audience and cause no hesitation for the wearer. The dresser pins a flower at the shoulder. Under ordinary daylight, its cloth petals appear somewhat stiff. Beneath the stage lighting, the shape will read clearly from the stalls. A softer, more natural flower might disappear into the color of the costume. Along the corridor, another call is delivered. "Quarter hour, please." Doors open and close. Answers come from within. A performer repeats the call to show it has been heard. Elsewhere, no answer is given, so the caller knocks again. The call is not an invitation. It is part of the theatre's control of time. Performers may prepare in different ways, but the production cannot wait upon individual preference. The stage manager needs to know that every beginner, meaning every performer required at the opening, is present and moving toward readiness. You continue to the next room. Here, a supporting performer is fastening a costume supplied from the theatre's stock. The skirt has been adapted from an earlier production. A line of stitch holes remains hidden beneath newer trim. The sleeves were changed during rehearsal, and the waist has been adjusted again this morning. The performer stands while the dresser arranges the hem. You crouch briefly to inspect the shortened section near the front. It must clear the stairs used in the altered entrance. In a drawing room, such a hem might seem slightly practical. On stage, where the lower part of the figure is partly concealed by furniture and distance, no one will question it. A pair of gloves causes more trouble. One has been placed on the wrong dressing table. The mistake is found before it matters because the wardrobe lists specify not simply that gloves are required, but which pair belongs to which costume and scene. A dresser retrieves them from the next room and returns without discussion. This is how many backstage difficulties are solved. No alarm, no public sign, and no story worth carrying beyond the building. An object is missing. A record identifies it. A worker restores it to its place. The theatre's apparent ease depends upon hundreds of such corrections. Out front, the auditorium is settling. Seats tip and return as patrons remove coats or make room for others. Programs rustle. Opera glasses are lifted toward the boxes and then toward the curtain. Friends lean together to identify someone across the house. The attendants continue guiding late arrivals. Their work requires tact because every ticket holder has purchased not only admission but an expectation of treatment suited to the seat. A box party receives one manner of attention. A crowded gallery requires another. The aim in both cases is order without making the order too visible. The matinee audience has a character of its own. It may include visitors in London, older patrons who prefer not to travel late, women attending together, families, and those whose schedules leave the afternoon freer than the evening. A successful matinee gives the management another house from the same scenery, costumes, and company, but it also lengthens the working day for every department. For wardrobe staff, 2 performances do not mean repeating one identical task twice. The first wearing changes what will be required for the second. Linen absorbs heat, pleats flatten, hooks strain, face paint reaches collars, shoes collect dust from the stage. A trim that survives the matinee may still need 3 new stitches before evening. You are already watching for those future repairs, though the first curtain has not yet risen. 5 minutes remain. The performers required for the opening leave their dressing rooms. Costumes that seemed large and awkward among washstands, chairs, and coat hooks begin to make sense as the figures move toward the stage. Skirts are lifted clear of doorways, gloves are drawn tight. A dresser follows long enough to inspect the back of a collar beneath the passage light. You stand beside the wardrobe rail and make a final visual count. The later costumes remain under covers or hang in scene order. Accessories for the rapid change are laid on a cloth, each object aligned according to the sequence of removal and replacement. From the auditorium comes the last unsettled murmur of the crowd. The house staff close the inner doors. Program sellers withdraw from the main flow. The box office clerk checks the late business while keeping the window available for final arrivals. An attendant guides two patrons to seats at the rear where they can sit without crossing a row after the performance begins. Behind the curtain, the stage belongs to the staff. A carpenter checks the set from the wing. Property workers confirm that the opening objects are in position. The prompter settles at the prompt desk with the working copy open. Musicians tune in brief, separate phrases before the sound gathers into order. The stage manager receives reports from the departments. Each answer is short. The scenery is ready. The properties are set. The performers are present. The front of the house can be informed that the stage is prepared. Then comes the beginner's call. Beginners, please. The first performers take their positions. One waits with a hand close to the edge of the scenery, careful not to disturb it. Another silently tests the path of an entrance by looking down at the floor marks. No audience member can see these checks. In another moment, the same people will appear to enter a complete world without effort. You check the repaired fastening once more as its wearer passes. Your fingers touch the seam for less than a second. It is flat and secure. The overture begins. Conversation in the auditorium falls away in layers. A few final words continue in the gallery, then stop. The front-of-house attendants take their places by the doors. Backstage, ordinary speech drops to a whisper. The conductor's timing reaches the stage through music and familiarity. The prompter follows the opening bars. A hand waits near the curtain mechanism. The first property is ready for its entrance. The first costume is exactly where it must be, carried by the performer who must appear in it. The audience sees the curtain rise. You see the cue that made it rise, the workers who prepared the space behind it, and the line of tasks already waiting beyond the first entrance. By 3 o'clock, the matinee has settled into its own working pace. The audience is absorbed in the painted room before them, but from your position near the wardrobe passage, the room has no fourth wall. Its doors are canvas and timber. Its polished panels are paint. One side ends abruptly beside a row of ropes, while the other gives way to a narrow lane where performers wait for entrances. The action travels through this hidden space in fragments. A line spoken on stage brings the property assistant forward with a letter. A musical phrase sends a member of the fly crew to the correct rope. The turn of a performer's head tells the caller that an exit is close. Each worker follows a different sequence, yet all those sequences must meet at the same second. You stand beside a costume rail arranged in performance order. The garments do not hang according to beauty, value, or social rank. They hang according to need. The dress required first is nearest the passage. Behind it comes a cloak for the second act, then an evening bodice with its fastenings already opened. Gloves rest together in a shallow tray. A brooch has been fixed to its intended place so that no one must search for it later. From the stage, a performer asks a question that you have heard at rehearsal and at the earlier performances. The answer comes with the expected pause. The prompter's finger moves down the page. That prompt copy is the working map of the production. To an ordinary reader, the printed play may seem complete. It contains speeches, entrances, and exits. To the theatre staff, it is only the beginning. The production copy gathers the practical life built around the words. Marginal notes mark music, curtain movements, properties, scene changes, warnings, lighting alterations, and calls for performers who may still be in their dressing rooms. Some instructions are entered in ink after days of rehearsal. Others are penciled because the stage manager may revise them. A cue must be tied to something that can be heard or seen clearly, often the final words of a speech rather than its general meaning. If a line is changed in performance, the person waiting on that line must still understand what is happening. The prompter, therefore, listens in two ways. One ear follows the story, the other follows the machinery of the evening. A sentence may sound like drawing room conversation to the audience, but backstage, its last three words release a sequence. A door is prepared, a lamp is carried forward, a performer receives a warning. Two scene workers move closer to their appointed places. The people stationed elsewhere cannot all see the prompter. Call staff carry information through passages and up staircases. A quiet warning reaches a dressing room before an entrance. Another travels toward the property table. Nobody raises a voice unless distance and necessity require it. The desired result is coordinated movement without any sign of hurry. You hear your own warning arrive. The first rapid change will begin in less than 2 minutes. A dresser draws the changing screen into place, although it offers more order than privacy in the cramped passage. The second costume has already been checked. Its hooks are open. The skirt is arranged so the performer can step directly into it. The sleeves have been turned enough to receive the hands without catching. Shoes wait with their fastenings loosened. A small cloth lies nearby to protect the pale bodice from stage paint. Nothing in this arrangement is accidental. A garment placed with its front turned the wrong way may cost several seconds. A glove pushed beneath another accessory may cause a search. A fastening left closed must be opened before it can be secured again. Each small delay steals time from the next task. The performer's exit approaches. You know it from the speech rather than from a direct view of the stage. The dresser knows it from the same words. Neither of you needs to announce what comes next. The performer passes through the painted door, leaves the audience's sight, and immediately raises both arms. The cloak comes away first. One dresser takes the hat. You release the bodice at the back, while another pair of hands manages the skirt. Stage posture gives way to practical balance as the performer steps from one costume and into another. There is almost no conversation. Left sleeve, gloves, ready. Short words prevent confusion. The new skirt rises into place. The bodice closes from the lower fastening upward, the order established during rehearsal. You smooth the collar, check the brooch, and draw the rear panel flat. The dresser offers the shoes, then the gloves. A final hand removes a loose thread that catches the work light. The caller gives the warning for the next entrance. The performer takes one breath, adjusts the position of the shoulders, and returns through another opening in the scenery. The audience sees a character who has changed her dress between scenes. It does not see the several workers, the prepared rail, the marked shoes, the opened hooks, or the repeated practice that made the change possible. Trust in such a moment is practical. The performer cannot inspect every fastening in a glass. She depends upon you to know whether the collar lies evenly and whether the skirt is clear of the heel. You depend upon her to stand in the agreed position, move in the agreed order, and resist turning suddenly while pins or hooks are being managed. This trust is earned through repetition. It is not based on private friendship, though friendship may sometimes grow around the work. It comes from finding the right glove in dim light, remembering which shoulder catches in a narrow sleeve, and saying at once when a fastening needs another second. A reassuring word offered without certainty is less useful than a plain warning. The change has succeeded, but the rail must be restored. Discarded garments cannot remain in a heap until the interval. Damp fabric wrinkles, trim bends. An unnoticed tear grows longer when the costume is next handled. You place the cloak on its hanger, spread the first skirt where air can reach it, and check the bodice at the points pulled most strongly during removal. On stage, the scene continues. The performer's voice gives no hint of the work just completed in the passage. Farther along the wings, the fly crew prepares for a change above the stage. The hanging scenery includes borders, cloths, and pieces designed to descend into view or rise out of it. Each line must be handled by workers who know both its weight and its appointed stopping point. A cloth lowered too far may fold along the floor. One stopped too high may expose the space beyond the painted scene. The property staff work on another timetable. Their tables are laid out with objects grouped by act and by entrance. A book used on stage is not simply returned wherever there is room. It goes back to its marked position. A hand property must be available to the correct hand, from the correct side, at the correct moment. Even an ordinary envelope may have several counterparts if the action requires one to be carried, opened, or replaced at each performance. Musicians receive their cues through the conductor and through sight lines established in rehearsal. The stage manager must understand all these departments without performing every task personally. Authority depends upon receiving accurate reports and deciding quickly when one part of the system must adjust for another. A difficulty arrives during the next scene. A performer enters a little later than expected. The delay is small, no more than the space of a breath and a half, but backstage it is immediately visible. The property assistant has already extended a hand with the required object. The person on stage holds the preceding moment without appearing to wait. The prompter keeps a finger on the line while watching the entrance. Then the performer appears. No alarm follows. The speech begins, the property passes into the correct hand, and the scene resumes its established pace. The audience may interpret the extra pause as thoughtfulness. Some will not notice it at all. Stage staff distinguish this kind of recoverable error from a larger timing problem. One late entrance that is smoothly absorbed calls for attention, not commotion. A sequence of delayed entrances may indicate that calls are not reaching the dressing room soon enough. A missed property could point to an incorrect reset. Several performers drifting from the expected pace may leave a scene change unprepared or bring music in at the wrong point. The first duty is to protect the performance already underway. Questions come later. Who received the warning? Was the passage blocked? Had an earlier scene ended faster than usual? Did the performer misunderstand the altered cue? A theatre cannot improve its routine if every mistake is treated as a personal failing, nor can it remain dependable if repeated lateness is excused as temperament. The stage manager makes a brief note. It will be examined after the act, when an answer can be found without disturbing the scenes that remain. From your position, you judge preparation through clothing. A performer who arrives before the call allows time for a weak hook to be replaced. One who checks the order of changes helps the dresser notice a missing accessory. Another may remember every line but forget that a newly shortened exit leaves less time to reach the next costume. Carpenters judge by movement. They know who clears a doorway promptly before scenery shifts and who tends to linger near a moving piece. Property workers notice who returns an object to the expected hand. Musicians recognize who listens for an introduction rather than guessing its length. Call staff know who responds at once and who requires a second warning. No single department possesses the whole account of a performer's skill. Together, however, the staff see patterns that a reviewer attending once cannot see. They witness the wet Wednesday matinee as well as the crowded Saturday evening. They observe how a performer works when applause is strong and when it is restrained, when a cue arrives perfectly and when a colleague leaves an awkward pause. Dependability does not mean that nothing ever goes wrong. Live performance prevents that promise. It means that a person continues to listen when the expected line is altered, leaves space for another worker to repair the sequence, and does not turn one small error into several. The act moves toward its close. Call staff travel through the passages with warnings for the next scene. A property is replaced on its mark. Above, the fly crew waits at the lines. Beside you, the dresser opens the next set of fastenings and places the correct gloves at the front of the tray. The matinee audience remains inside the painted world. You stand just beyond its door, where the paint ends and the method begins. A final speech gathers the scene together. The prompter watches the page. The stage manager watches the wings. You watch the approaching costume, already calculating what must come off first and what must be ready beneath your hands. The cue is spoken, the curtain begins to descend, and before the applause has fully risen, the backstage company is moving into the next sequence. The applause reaches you as a softened rush through canvas, timber, and hanging cloth. It lasts long enough for the performers to take their places for the next scene, but not long enough for anyone backstage to become idle. By 4 o'clock, the theatre has grown warm. The matinee audience contributes its share. Hundreds of bodies enclosed beneath coats, hats, and layered afternoon dress. Behind the curtain, lamps add more heat. The performers add still more beneath lined costumes and face paint. In the wings, where air moves poorly, even a cool autumn day can feel close. You lift one bodice from the change chair and examine the color beneath the shaded work lamp. In the fitting room, it appeared a rather ordinary brown. On stage, under the stronger illumination, its red threads have come forward. The cloth reads as a deep chestnut from the stalls. Narrow bands of dull gold trim catch just enough light to define the waist and sleeves. That result is not accidental. A stage costume is judged twice. First, you judge it at arm's length, where you can inspect its seams and fastenings. Then, it must be judged from the auditorium, under the lamps, against painted scenery, and beside the other costumes in the scene. A shade that seems handsome in daylight may disappear into a dark interior set. Pale blue can lose strength beneath warm light. Black may become a blank shape unless lace, jet, satin, or some change in surface gives it form. White can command more attention than the role is meant to receive. Every color takes part in the arrangement of the stage, whether the audience consciously notices it or not. The scene now in progress is set in a painted room. Its walls are canvas stretched over frames. Moldings that appear solid from the stalls are made with paint and narrow lengths of timber. Highlights have been placed where the designer expects illumination to fall. Shadows have also been painted in because actual light cannot be trusted to create every depth required by the picture. From your position, the room looks incomplete. You can see the plain backs of the flats, braces on the floor, and numbers marked for the crew. Through a narrow gap, however, the audience sees polished architecture. Light supplies the distance needed for paint to become paneled wood, cloth to become stone, and a shallow arrangement of scenery to suggest a much larger house. In 1895, electric illumination is no longer a novelty in prosperous London theatres. The Savoy Theatre had famously opened with electric light in 1881, and other leading houses followed as systems became more dependable. Yet the change was neither instant nor uniform. Theatre workers of long experience still remember gas jets along the footlights and battens, the small adjustments required to regulate them, and the effect of their warmer glow upon paint and fabric. Some buildings retain parts of older arrangements during conversion. Others keep fittings for a time because replacing an entire system costs money and interrupts performances. A theatre may therefore belong to two technical generations at once. Electric lamps illuminate much of the house, while older workers continue to use habits learned under gas. The vocabulary, caution, and eye for color survive even after the fittings change. Electric light offers cleaner air and finer control in many situations, but it does not remove heat. Incandescent lamps turn a large part of their energy into warmth. Carbon arc lamps, where used for strong effects, require skilled attention. Limelight may still serve for a concentrated beam or a bright special effect, especially in theatres whose equipment has been assembled over several years rather than installed all at once. Limelight is produced by directing an intense flame upon a small piece of lime, which glows with a powerful white light. Its operation belongs to trained technicians, not to the performers standing within its beam. The light may follow an entrance, isolate a figure, or strengthen the center of a scene. To the audience, it can seem as though attention has naturally gathered around the performer. Behind that impression is a worker judging angle, distance, timing, and brightness. You do not need to operate the apparatus to understand its consequences. A costume intended for a strongly lit entrance requires a different balance from one worn in a dim ensemble scene. Reflective trim must be placed with restraint. Pale face paint can look flat if the light strikes too directly. A polished ornament may flash when the wearer turns, drawing the eye away from a line that matters more. Near the side of the stage, the electrician and assistants watch their cues. Depending on the theatre's arrangement, controls may include switches, resistance devices, and circuits assigned to separate groups of lamps. Illumination can be raised, lowered, or shifted by area, though the process is less fluid than a modern audience might expect. Each change must be prepared and called. An effect that seems gradual in the auditorium may depend on several hands acting in sequence. The prompt copy contains the warning. The stage manager gives or confirms the cue. The electrician makes the change. A performer reaches the marked position. If one part arrives early, the face may remain in shadow. If it arrives late, a supposedly quiet corner may become conspicuous before the action is ready for it. This is why technicians know a particular kind of truth about performers. They know who finds the light without searching for it. They know who remembers the mark even when scenery has been adjusted by a few inches. They know who turns at the proper moment, allowing a face to be seen, and who drifts beyond the best lit part of the stage when attention is divided. The performer, in turn, depends upon facts that cannot be checked from within the scene. From the stage, strong illumination makes it difficult to judge how clearly an expression reaches the upper gallery. A performer may sense the audience as a darkened mass rather than a collection of visible faces. The electrician and stage manager see the larger picture. They can report that an entrance is too dim, that a hat brim cuts the eyes from view, or that a costume merges with the scenery. Your own reports are narrower but no less useful. You notice that the green velvet sleeve appears almost black against the painted doorway. You see that a silvered buckle catches too much light during a turn. You recognize that a cream collar separates the face from a dark coat more clearly than the previous grey one did. Such judgments belong to stage work rather than ordinary dressmaking. In a private fitting room, a client may care most about fashion, finish, and the view in a mirror. You must also think of the person seated farthest from the stage. That patron cannot inspect fine embroidery. The patron sees outline, contrast, movement, and the broad relation between one figure and another. This encourages a practical economy. Expensive material is not always required where paint, trim, and placement can produce the desired effect. Cotton velvet may serve where silk velvet would burden the budget. Gilt braid can suggest richer metalwork. Paste stones can provide brilliance without the expense or worry attached to valuable jewelry. A strip of trim may be concentrated across the front of a garment because the back is seldom presented fully to the house. Economy cannot become carelessness, though. Cheap material placed badly looks cheap under strong light. A painted ornament must be handled so that its surface does not crack. A light fabric may require a firm foundation if it is to maintain its line through repeated movement. The theatre can persuade the eye at a distance, but only when each department understands what the eye will accept. A warning comes from the stage manager. The next lighting change approaches. The wing grows darker as selected lamps are lowered. Shaded work lights remain in places where the crew must see ropes, properties, steps, and entrances without casting unwanted brightness onto the scene. Their small pools of light create a separate backstage map. One lamp marks a property table, another shows the turn in a passage, a third allows a caller to read a list. Beyond these pools, people move by memory. The carpenter knows the position of a brace. A property worker knows which table stands nearest the next entrance. You know how many steps separate the wardrobe rail from the change chair. Order matters because the public lighting is designed for the picture, not for backstage convenience. The lighting shift arrives. A painted window takes on the suggestion of late afternoon. The performers alter nothing in their lines, yet the scene seems to have advanced in time. The audience reads the change through brightness and color before any character mentions the hour. Experienced theater workers understand how readily light guides interpretation. It tells the audience where to look. It makes one door important and another door ordinary. It can conceal the edge of a cloth, soften a painted surface, or make a shallow stage appear deeper. The same scenery under the plain light of rehearsal seems exposed and workmanlike. Under performance lighting, its separate pieces agree to become one place. The effect also reaches face paint. Stage cosmetics in this period are designed for visibility rather than close inspection. A face must retain its structure at a distance and under illumination that can flatten natural color. Powder reduces shine. Color restores definition to cheeks and lips. Brows and eyes may be strengthened. The exact method varies with the performer, the role, the size of the house, and the quality of the lamps. Too little color can leave a face indistinct. Too much may seem coarse in the dressing room mirror, but balanced from the auditorium. This is another division between private appearance and professional appearance. The mirror stands a few inches away. The audience sits many yards away, with scenery, costumes, and other faces competing for notice. Staff members learn not to judge stage paint at corridor distance. You may pass a performer under a work lamp and see every deliberate line. Moments later, through the opening of the wing, those lines have combined into a clear expression. The heat tests all of this workmanship. Face paint must remain presentable. Wigs and dressed hair must keep their form. Adhesive, stitching, and wire supports must tolerate warmth and motion. Costume linings absorb the strain of repeated wear, which is one reason you inspect them even when the visible exterior appears sound. The theatre's precautions against fire are woven into its daily operation. Exits must remain usable. Passageways cannot become storage spaces merely because a basket or scenery frame is convenient there. Lamps and heated apparatus require supervision. Scenery, draperies, and costumes are kept away from fittings that need clear space. A safety curtain separates stage and auditorium when lowered, and staff must understand their assigned duties. Rules have become stricter through building requirements, licensing, and the accumulated experience of theatre management. Yet written rules are only effective when ordinary habits support them. A doorway kept clear at noon is still clear at 8. A lamp checked before the matinee is less likely to interrupt the evening. A worker who reports a frayed wire, loose fitting, or obstructed passage protects the production through attention rather than display. Your part includes keeping costume rails where they belong and ensuring that discarded garments do not gather near lamps. During a rapid change, everything must be removed from the floor as soon as hands permit. A skirt left across a passage is not merely untidy. It interferes with the route used by callers, dressers, and performers entering in low light. Another cue passes, the stage brightens, and the chestnut bodice returns into view. From the wing, you watch the gold trim define the performer's movement. The brown that seemed dull earlier now holds its place against the painted wall. It neither disappears nor demands notice beyond the importance of the role. The sleeve opens cleanly when an arm is raised. The face remains visible above the collar. You make a small note for the evening performance. One fastening will need checking before the next house. The costume itself has proved its color. On stage, the audience sees a room, an hour of the day, and a group of people held together by a single field of light. Behind it, technicians watch circuits and cues. Stage staff guard clear paths. Dressers judge the effects of warmth. You stand beside a rail of fabrics whose true colors are revealed only after the lamps are raised. The scene continues, bright and assured. Around it, just outside the audience's sight, the theatre measures every degree of that assurance in switches, sight lines, painted shadows, and careful hands. By 5 o'clock, the last act is moving toward its conclusion. The colours have held, the scene changes have kept their appointed pace, and the weakened fastening on the chestnut bodice has survived every lifted arm and sudden turn. It will not be asked to survive another performance without attention. From your place in the wing, you can sense the matinee nearing its end before the final lines are spoken. The property staff begin thinking about collection rather than delivery. A dresser draws an empty basket closer to the dressing room stairs. One of the call staff checks the order of the curtain calls. The fly crew stands ready for the last change of cloth. Every department remains attentive to the present scene while preparing for the minute after it. The final exchange is delivered. There is a breath of stillness, followed by applause. The curtain descends, rises, and descends again. The principal performers step forward in billing order, each acknowledging the audience according to custom and rank. Supporting players appear beside them. The company joins hands for the last call. Smiles remain visible until the curtain hides them. Then the stage voices change. The polished projection used for the auditorium gives way to ordinary speech. A performer asks whether supper has arrived. Someone wants to know where a pair of street gloves was put. Another has already begun removing a heavy collar while walking toward the dressing rooms. The orchestra closes its music. Chairs scrape. Instruments are placed into cases or left ready for the evening according to the musician's habit and the theatre's arrangements. Out in the auditorium, the audience gathers coats, programs, and parcels. The more expensive seats empty first into carpeted passages. From the gallery, departure takes longer. Front-of-house attendants hold doors and inspect rows for lost belongings. The box office clerk turns from the afternoon account toward the evening bookings. Backstage, there is no corresponding departure. The matinee has ended for the audience. For you, it has become evidence. The chestnut bodice reaches your hands while it is still warm. You turn it beneath the work light and test the fastening with one finger. The thread has stretched. It has not broken, but the strain is visible at the edge of the buttonhole. You place the garment across a table rather than returning it to the rail. Before evening, you tell the dresser, that is enough. No discussion is required. All around you, costumes are being released from performance. Skirts come over heads or fall carefully around ankles. Hooks are opened in a practiced order, pins return to cushions. Jewelry made for the stage is laid into divided trays, not dropped onto dressing tables among private possessions. Gloves are paired, fans are folded, shoes are checked for loose ribbons and worn heels. The air carries face powder, warmed fabric, pressing cloth, and the plain human heat of crowded rooms. Doors are opened where they can be opened. Costumes that have become damp are hung apart so that air can pass between them. To pack them close while they are warm would hold moisture in the linings and make the evening dressing less comfortable. A garment used twice in one day needs more than a few hours on a peg. Collars that sit against the neck are detached when the construction allows it. Fresh ones replace them. Washable cuffs are removed and put into a marked basket. Underarm shields are examined. Pale fabric is checked at the hem, where stage dust gathers even on a floor that has been swept. The wardrobe workroom becomes a sorting station. One rail holds pieces ready to be aired. Another receives garments that need pressing. A basket is reserved for linen going to the laundry. Repairs wait on the table, arranged by urgency rather than by the importance of the wearer. The chestnut bodice comes first because it is needed early in the evening. A strained seam in a costume worn during the final act can wait several minutes longer. A missing decorative button may wait if it has no working purpose and cannot be seen from the auditorium. A loose hook that carries the weight of a skirt cannot. This order is one of the quiet forms of judgment on which the performance depends. You do not mend whatever reaches you first. You decide what could delay a change, alter a silhouette, catch on another layer, or fail beneath movement. The needle follows the timetable. At the pressing table, a skirt is turned on its waistband so that the outer surface does not acquire an unwanted shine. A damp cloth is placed between iron and fabric. Pleats are restored by hand. Trims are lifted away from direct heat. Velvet requires particular caution because a crushed pile can show under the lamps even when it seems acceptable in the workroom. Elsewhere, a dresser wipes the inside of a pair of stage shoes and checks their fastenings. A wig that has lost part of its arrangement is carried to the person responsible for hair. Small curls are secured again. Hairpins are counted into a shallow dish. A ribbon is replaced because the old one has absorbed enough moisture to lose its crisp shape. None of these things appears grand in an account book. Taken together, they help determine whether a production can continue night after night without looking tired. A long run is often spoken of as financial success, and for management it may become one. Yet every additional performance creates additional expense. The scenery may already have been painted and the costumes already made, but continued use is not free. Linen must be washed. Boots require new soles and heels. Gloves become marked. Braid frays at the edges. Feathers lose their form. Wigs need cleaning and resetting. Powder, thread, tape, hooks, eyes, pins, ribbons, starch, soap, and pressing cloth are consumed in small amounts that accumulate across weeks. The wage bill also extends beyond the names printed prominently on the playbill. Dressers may be paid by the week, by the engagement, or under arrangements tied to particular performers. Extra assistance can be required for a production with large crowd scenes or many rapid changes. Laundries charge for the articles sent out, and urgent work may cost more than routine collections. A shoemaker's repair, taken alone, seems modest. Multiply it across a company wearing stage footwear 6 evenings and perhaps 1 or 2 matinees each week, and it becomes a regular line in the books. Hired costumes bring their own calculations. A specialist costumier may supply a complete garment, a military coat, a ceremonial robe, or a group of matching pieces that the theatre does not wish to purchase outright. Hiring reduces the initial cost, but the fees continue for as long as the articles remain in use. Management may also be responsible for damage beyond ordinary wear. Every label must stay with the correct piece. Every alteration must be made in a form that can later be removed or approved. The wardrobe therefore preserves not only clothing, but capital. A bodice repaired in time is a bodice that does not need replacement. A detachable collar protects more expensive fabric beneath it. Reinforcement added before a seam opens saves labor later. Your needle is part of the production budget, although no audience member buying a seat would think of it in those terms. The performers carry costs of their own. Depending on contract, rank, and theatre practice, some provide personal stockings, gloves, shoes, underclothing, or suitable modern dress. A performer who appears prosperous under the lamps may still be watching every expense between engagements. The staff do not need gossip to understand this. You see which items arrive from home, which are repaired repeatedly, and which requests must pass through management before anything new is supplied. Today's matinee has already told you what the evening will require. The chestnut bodice needs its fastening renewed. A pale skirt caught briefly against a stair and should be shortened by another fraction at the back. One performer reached the wing later than usual after a change, not because of carelessness, but because a sleeve opening resisted the hand. You mark it for adjustment. Another needed an extra moment to recover breath before an entrance. The caller should give that dressing room its warning promptly, without assuming the ordinary margin will be enough. Near the end of the second act, a flower slipped from a hat. It did not fall on stage, and the audience knew nothing of it. For the evening, the flower will be secured at 2 points rather than 1. A glove was returned to the wrong tray. A fan was left folded when it should have been open and ready for collection. A shoe buckle has begun to turn against its strap. None of these is a disaster. That is exactly why they are dealt with now. Backstage competence is built less from dramatic rescue than from preventing a small fault from receiving a second opportunity. The repair table slowly clears. You remove the old thread from the chestnut bodice and sew the fastening through the reinforced layer beneath the visible cloth. The stitches are short and close. When the work is finished, you pull against it more firmly than the performer will during the entrance. It holds. The bodice returns to its hanger, with the accessories required for its first appearance placed beside it in order. The dresser will not need to search for the brooch or ask which gloves belong with it. On a nearby rail, the shortened skirt hangs with its back facing outward, a simple signal that its alteration should be checked during dressing. Beyond the workroom, the theatre settles into an interval that is neither silence nor rest. The public doors are closed, but deliveries continue at the stage entrance. A porter carries in a parcel of cleaned linen. The evening programs are moved to the front. The stage is swept where dust has been disturbed during the matinee. Property tables are reset from the beginning of the play, each object returning to its marked position. The company has a little time for food. Some performers leave the building briefly, keeping an eye on the hour. Others eat in dressing rooms or in a nearby room permitted for the purpose. The staff take supper in basements, workshops, or any corner where a chair and a clear surface can be found. Your own meal is plain and practical, perhaps bread with cold meat, a little cheese, and tea poured from a pot that has already served several people. You sit without removing your work apron. There is no reason to pretend the day is over, and no one at the table makes that mistake. Conversation stays close to the work. Someone reports that a property drawer stuck during the matinee. A carpenter has already eased it. The caller asks whether the altered skirt will be ready. You answer that it is hanging in place. A dresser mentions the reluctant sleeve. You tell her the opening has been adjusted and ask her to test it at the evening dressing. Around 6:30, the pause begins to narrow. Plates are cleared. Cups are rinsed or set aside. The first members of the evening company return through the stage door, bringing cooler air into the passage with them. Messages are collected. Dressing room lamps are lit. The building, which never truly became idle, gathers itself for another house. You rise from the supper table and return to the wardrobe rail. Every costume now faces the correct direction. Fresh collars wait beside the garments they belong to. Shoes stand in pairs. Jewelry rests in labeled spaces. Repairs made after the matinee have disappeared into seams, hems, and fastenings. The afternoon audience has gone home carrying an impression of ease. You carry something more useful, the exact knowledge of where that ease was tested, where it held, and where it must be strengthened before the curtain rises again. That useful knowledge does not appear on the printed bill. Neither does the name of the dresser who tested the sleeve, the carpenter who eased the drawer, or the caller who will make certain that each beginner reaches the wings before an entrance. The bill presents the company as the public is meant to understand it, a descending order of importance set in type. The leading performer receives the largest letters. If the theatre is governed by an actor-manager, his name may stand above the title, linked in the public mind with the whole enterprise. The leading woman follows according to her contractual standing and the size of her role. Supporting players appear below them. Lesser parts occupy smaller lines. Dancers, singers, and groups may be listed together. The supers who fill a crowd scene can pass almost without individual notice. Inside the building, rank has many more forms than large or small print. You can read it in the dressing rooms. A principal performer may have a private room near the stage with a good mirror, a washstand, hooks enough for several costumes, and space for a personal dresser. A supporting player may share. Someone engaged for a few lines may dress in a room crowded with garments, boxes, and other people preparing at the same time. You can read rank in the wardrobe allowance. One performer receives a costume designed and made for the part. Another is fitted into a garment retained from an earlier production. A third provides ordinary evening dress, boots, gloves, or linen from personal means because the contract expects it. Management may supply clothes particular to the play while treating respectable modern dress as the performer's own responsibility. This distinction matters. An audience sees an entire figure and assumes that the theatre has created it. The account books divide that figure into separate obligations. The historical gown belongs to management or has been hired from a costumier. The shirt may belong to the actor. The shoes may be his responsibility unless an unusual shape or color is required. A woman engaged for a fashionable drawing room part may be expected to appear with gloves, stockings, and other personal articles suitable to her supposed rank. If her salary is modest, the requirement consumes part of it before she has paid for lodging, food, transport, laundry, or professional photographs. A successful appearance can therefore conceal a strained purse. You do not need access to anyone's private correspondence to recognize it. You notice which garments are carefully maintained because replacing them would be difficult. You know who asks whether last season's gloves can serve once more. You see a performer studying a worn shoe and calculating whether polish will carry it through another week. The wages themselves vary widely. A recognized principal can bargain for a sum far beyond anything earned by an ordinary theatre worker. A supporting player may receive a respectable weekly salary while engaged, though not enough to make a long interval between productions comfortable. A minor performer can earn only a few pounds a week, sometimes less, and employment may last no longer than the run. Your own position offers a different bargain. As wardrobe mistress, you may have steadier authority within the department, but the security is tied to the theatre's program and management. A production that closes early can reduce the need for extra hands. A change of management can bring new department heads. A tour may require fewer workers, each expected to cover more tasks. Long experience helps, yet it does not make a contract permanent. The public sees success in applause. Theatre workers learn to measure it in weeks. A crowded opening night is encouraging, but it does not guarantee a long run. Advance bookings, newspaper notices, operating costs, and the audience's willingness to recommend the play all matter. A production carries wages, scenery expenses, music, lighting, printing, advertising, cleaning, costume upkeep, and rent or financial obligations attached to the building. Even when seats are occupied, the sums must be balanced. For performers, engagement agreements define much of daily life. A contract can state the role, salary, rehearsal requirements, the date on which service begins, and whether touring is expected. It can limit outside appearances. It may require the performer to provide a suitable wardrobe for modern parts. Billing position can be negotiated as carefully as pay because prominent billing helps secure the next engagement. The order of names is not mere vanity. It is a form of professional currency. A performer announced in large type can point to that notice when seeking later work. Someone repeatedly placed low on the bill may struggle to persuade another manager that a larger part should be entrusted to them. Reviews can alter the balance, but reviews are uncertain things. Printed position remains visible outside the theatre every day. You encounter these distinctions without discussing them. They reach you as instructions. The principal's alteration is required first. A leading costume must be ready for a photograph. A replacement trim has been approved for one role, while another garment must be repaired with materials already in the cupboard. One dressing room receives an additional lamp. Another receives a request to share a mirror. There are ranks within ranks. An understudy may occupy a small place on the bill, yet carry a remarkable burden. That person must learn another performer's words, movements, entrances, costume sequence, and use of properties, often while continuing in a smaller, regular role. The audience may barely know the understudy exists. The stage manager and department heads know otherwise. You keep alteration notes that can serve two wearers. A hem arranged for the principal may need a temporary adjustment if the understudy is shorter. Fastenings must remain intelligible to a different dresser. A hat positioned at one angle for the usual wearer may require fresh pins. If a substitution is made, wardrobe cannot begin by asking what ought to happen. much of the answer must already be recorded. The dancers and singers work under their own pressures of repetition and placement. Musicians enter by another passage and settle below the stage or in their appointed area, but the performance depends upon their timing. Supers wait for the scenes in which the stage needs soldiers, guests, servants, townspeople, or a general impression of public activity. They may be paid by the performance or by a short engagement, and their time in view can be brief. Their entrance still has to occur on the correct cue, in the correct clothing, with every borrowed item returned afterward. Apprentices and younger workers learn by proximity. They carry messages, fetch garments, hold pins, prepare brushes, and watch how experienced hands arrange a change. Instruction is not always delivered as a lesson. It is embedded in the order of tasks. Put the shoes where they can be reached without turning. Leave the next fastening open. Never place jewelry beneath loose fabric. Count borrowed pieces before and after use. Departmental rank is equally exact. Management decides what the production requires and what it can afford. The stage manager converts those decisions into calls, rehearsals, written cues, and daily discipline. Department heads organize their own workers. Carpenters answer for scenery and working structures. Property staff answer for the objects handled in the play. Electricians and other lighting workers maintain illumination. Wardrobe prepares the clothing and supervises its condition. Dressers carry that work into the dressing rooms and rapid changes. Authority travels downward, but information travels in every direction. A dresser reports that a fastening fails under hurried use. You decide how it should be altered. A caller warns you that an entrance has moved. You change the order in which garments are set out. A performer says that a sleeve prevents a necessary gesture. You examine the seam, then determine whether the complaint requires a structural change or merely a different method of dressing. The best arrangements depend on workers being able to report facts plainly. Rank does not remove dependence. It organizes it. Even the actor-manager, whose name may dominate the front of the theater, cannot produce an entrance alone. A message must reach the dressing room. The costume must be wearable. The required property must be waiting. Scenery must leave a clear path. The orchestra must be prepared for its cue. Lighting must reveal the figure at the intended instant. The door in the set must open without resistance. The audience experiences a single arrival. Backstage, that arrival is the meeting point of many separate duties. Benefit performances reveal another part of theatrical organization. A benefit may be arranged in connection with a particular performer, a theatre worker, or a charitable purpose, with the occasion advertised to draw a supportive audience. Earlier in the century, benefits had formed an important part of performers' earnings. By the end of the Victorian period, arrangements differed, but special performances still carried professional and financial meaning. They required cooperation beyond the ordinary run. Bills might be altered, additional pieces could be rehearsed, colleagues might contribute appearances, printers, box office staff, musicians, wardrobe workers, and stage crews all absorbed the effects of a program that departed from routine. Publicly, the event honored the named person or cause. Practically, it depended on the same network that supported every other performance. Touring makes that network easier to see because much of it must be packed. A company leaving London for provincial theatres cannot carry every object without regard to expense. Scenery may be adapted. Costumes travel in hampers and baskets. Properties are listed. Musicians may be engaged locally or travel with the production according to the arrangement. Performers move between lodgings while maintaining rehearsal and performance schedules. Department workers learn the limitations of unfamiliar stages, dressing rooms, passages, and lighting systems. A costume change that takes place comfortably here might become difficult in a theatre with a narrower stair. A large hat that fits safely on your present shelf may require a travelling box. Damp weather affects fabric. Railway handling affects luggage. Missing labels consume time. Touring turns order into protection against confusion. Contracts that include touring can therefore look attractive and burdensome at once. They promise continued employment, but they also require mobility, extra packing, irregular rooms, and the cost of living away from home. A celebrated performer may travel with assistance. A lesser player may manage clothing and luggage personally. The company shares the route but does not share it under equal conditions. By now, the workrooms are fully awake again. The last supper cup has disappeared from the table. Footsteps pass overhead. A musician tests a short phrase and stops. From the stage door passage comes the sound of another arrival being entered in the book. The leading players, supporting company, understudies, dancers, musicians, supers, apprentices, callers, dressers, carpenters, property workers and attendants are returning to their places. Their names will not be printed with equal prominence. Some will not be printed at all. Yet the evening performance cannot be divided according to type size. The smallest duty can become highly visible if it is neglected. When it is performed well, it vanishes into the whole. You make one final circuit of the wardrobe rail. A principal costume occupies more space and represents more expense than the plain coat hanging beside it. Both must be ready. You test the altered fastening with 2 fingers. It releases at once. The shortened skirt clears the floor. Fresh gloves lie palm downward so that they can be lifted without disturbing the pair. From the passage, the first formal call of the evening approaches. Conversation shortens. Doors open and close. The company's hierarchy remains in place, written into rooms, salaries, contracts, costumes, and printed bills. For the next few hours, however, every rank will be bound to the same clock. 7 o'clock is announced by the stage manager's clock, though several clocks in the building disagree by a minute or 2. Backstage, only one of them matters. The call staff work from it. The orchestra is expected to obey it, and every entrance in the prompt copy depends upon it. A caller begins at the upper dressing rooms and works downward, knocking firmly at each door. "Half hour, please." The words travel along the passage, repeated at every occupied room. They do not mean that every performer must already be dressed. They mean that the public performance begins in 30 minutes and that no one may now behave as though there is time to spare. You hear acknowledgements through the doors. Some are immediate. Others arrive after a second knock. The caller listens for each answer and remembers any silence. A performer who has entered the building but cannot be found is not merely late to a personal appointment. Costumes, cues, music, scenery, and other people's movements have been arranged around that performer's presence. The evening transformation begins in earnest. Street coats are placed on hooks. Hats go into boxes or onto pegs. Boots are exchanged for stage shoes, which may have thinner soles, brighter buckles, or carefully dulled leather according to the production. A performer appearing in several scenes does not simply dress for the opening. Everything must be arranged with the final change in mind. That is why your department works backward from the most difficult moment of the evening. A gown needed in the first act may be fastened in the ordinary manner. Another, required during a short interval later on, has hooks positioned for speed. A decorative row of buttons may conceal the simpler fastening beneath. Jewelry is laid out in sequence. Gloves are opened at the wrist. A cloak is hung with its lining facing outward so that it can be gathered and placed over the shoulders without being turned. On the dressing table, face paint, powder, hairpins, combs, small towels, and cold cream occupy fixed positions. Strong stage illumination alters the appearance of every complexion. Features that seem fully visible beside a window can lose definition at a distance, while a color that appears emphatic in the dressing room may settle into a natural effect beyond the footlights. The performer and dresser therefore work partly by experience and partly by trust. The dresser knows how the finished appearance should read from the stalls. The performer knows how it must feel when speaking, turning, kneeling, or crossing a brightly lit stage. You inspect the first principal costume while it is being put on. The foundation layers are already in place. Over them comes the structured bodice, reinforced at points where repeated movement pulls against the seams. The skirt is settled evenly, then checked at the back. Trim is straightened. A small crease beneath one arm is smoothed before it can deepen under heat and motion. The whole process is orderly but never leisurely. A sleeve must permit the gesture required in the second scene. A collar must remain firm without restricting the voice. A necklace must catch enough light to be seen without striking the bodice when the performer turns. The appearance offered to the audience depends upon adjustments that may be measured in fractions of an inch. Hair receives the same attention. Some performers use their own hair arranged to suit the period or character. Others require additional pieces or a full wig. Pins must hold through quick movement, yet be placed so that they can be removed without delay. A hat needed later may require the hair beneath it to be built lower than current fashion would suggest. Theatre hair is planned not only for beauty, but for continuity. If a performer removes a hat in one scene and appears bareheaded in the next, the arrangement must remain convincing from both conditions. If a wig is used, its position is marked through habit. The dresser recognizes the correct line at the brow as readily as you recognize the balance of a hem. A brief word is enough. Higher. The piece is lifted. A little to the left. One pin is removed and replaced. There is no reason for a long discussion because the same work has already been repeated at rehearsal and during the matinee. Repetition has created its own compact language. This is also where backstage staff learn to distinguish preference from necessity. One performer dislikes a tight cuff because it distracts from hand movements. Another asks for every hook to be checked twice. A third wants the first costume prepared in silence and the later changes accompanied by quiet reminders. These habits are not private revelations. They are working requirements. You accommodate them where the production permits, just as a carpenter remembers which piece of scenery needs an extra push, or a property worker remembers how a particular object must be placed for the correct hand. Professional temperament is often most visible in response to routine. One performer welcomes conversation until the beginner's call. Another closes the dressing room door and reviews the opening speech alone. Someone else asks whether a property has been set, receives the answer, and asks again 5 minutes later. A less experienced player may walk through an entrance in the mind, moving one hand as though opening an unseen door. An established performer may appear perfectly at ease while listening closely to every sound from the stage. The staff do not need to decide which habit is best. They need to know which habit produces reliable work. You pass into the corridor as the caller begins another circuit. "Quarter hour, please." The phrase is heard differently now. At the half hour, there was still room to make a modest correction. At the quarter hour, unfinished preparation becomes a departmental concern. A dresser who has been waiting for a performer steps into the passage and looks toward the stairs. The caller checks the room. The stage doorkeeper is asked whether the arrival was recorded. If the performer is in the building, the search remains quiet. Alarm wastes time and spreads distraction. Tonight, the answer is simple. The missing figure is in the wig room, delayed by an adjustment. A message returns at once. The costume is made ready so that dressing can begin the moment the performer comes downstairs. Calls may sound like courtesies because of the word please, but they belong to a firm system. The half hour warns the company. The quarter hour narrows the remaining time. A later call may announce 5 minutes. The beginner's call summons everyone required at the opening of the performance, including those who must be waiting in the wings before the curtain rises. The precise wording varies between theatres and companies. The purpose does not. Each call converts the large evening schedule into immediate obligations. Callers must know the building as well as the cast. A voice delivered too softly through a thick door may not be heard. A message sent to the wrong room may cost several minutes. If a performer has moved for a fitting, a photograph, or an adjustment, the caller must discover that change, rather than assume the usual arrangement, still holds. Written call sheets help, so do lists posted where company members can see them. Yet paper cannot replace the person walking the stairs, receiving answers, and reporting uncertainty to the stage manager. Compliance is remembered and, in stricter companies, recorded. Repeated lateness can lead to a reprimand or a financial penalty under company rules and contracts. The sum matters, but the greater consequence is professional reputation. Managers value performers who can be trusted to answer calls, attend rehearsals, and stand ready at the appointed cue. Skill before an audience does not excuse disorder that places the whole company at risk. The wardrobe department keeps its own quieter record. You know who returns every item to the dresser's hands and who leaves gloves on chairs. You know whose jewelry is removed before a quick change and whose must be unfastened at the final possible moment. You know which performer reports a loose seam while it can still be repaired, and which one says nothing until the garment is nearly required. These details influence preparation. They may even influence cost. An accessory repeatedly misplaced must be replaced. A costume handled carelessly requires extra labor. Management may see only an entry in an account book, but your department knows the sequence of actions that produced it. The next few minutes gather pace. Powder boxes close. Street clothes disappear behind screens or into wardrobes. Shoes are secured. Bracelets are tested so that clasps will not open during a gesture. A flower is pinned at the correct angle, removed and pinned again because its shadow falls badly against the neckline. You check the rails outside the principal rooms. Every later costume hangs in performance order. Labels face outward. Small accessories rest in shallow trays rather than deep boxes where a hurried hand might fail to find them. A garment needed for the fastest change is never hidden behind one required at leisure. Near one door, 2 pairs of gloves look almost identical. They are not interchangeable. One pair belongs to the opening costume and has been softened by wear. The other must remain clean for a later scene. You move them farther apart and repeat the distinction to the dresser. Downstairs, the orchestra gathers. Chairs shift. Music stands receive their parts. Instruments sound in short, separate notes, each musician testing pitch and response rather than playing for the audience. The noises rise through the theatre in fragments. At the front of the house, patrons continue to enter. Programs change hands. Seats fold down. Coats are settled. Conversation fills the auditorium with a low, uneven murmur. Those sounds reach backstage in altered form, passing through curtains, scenery, floors, and walls. An experienced performer can judge the size and mood of the house from that murmur. So can an experienced attendant. A full audience has one sound, a thin audience another. A restless house is different from a patient one. Yet no department can allow the quality of its work to depend entirely upon the number of occupied seats. The caller reaches the passage once more. Beginners, please. Doors open almost together. Those needed for the first scene leave their rooms in costume. They lift skirts clear of the floor where necessary. Cloaks are held away from fresh paint. One performer carries gloves rather than wearing them until the last moment. Another quietly repeats the opening line, then stops before reaching the stairs. The dressers follow far enough to make final checks. A shoulder seam lies flat. A chain is centered. A cuff has twisted and is put right with 2 quick movements. You inspect the shortened skirt that caused concern during rehearsal. It clears the steps exactly as intended. From this point, each person takes a known route. Beginners move toward the stage. Those appearing later remain in their rooms or wait where instructed. Dressers return to prepare the first changes. The caller reports readiness. Property workers stand by their tables. Carpenters and scene staff occupy the positions assigned by the opening sequence. The prompter has the working copy open under a shaded light. You return to the wardrobe station. A needle is already threaded. Spare hooks, pins, tape, scissors, and dark thread are within reach. Nothing should be required, but readiness is built from the possibility that something will be. The last dressing room conversation fades. Another door closes. Footsteps become lighter as people approach the stage. Then the orchestra begins the overture. Beyond the curtain, the audience hears the evening's first finished sound. Behind it, callers listen, dressers wait, performers take their marks, and technicians watch for cues that have not yet arrived. The half hour is over. Every preparation has narrowed to its appointed place, and the theatre is ready to move as one. The overture reaches its final bars, and the waiting company becomes very still. A signal passes from the conductor to the prompter, then from the prompter to the stage. The curtain rises. Painted cloth, timber frames, furniture, costumes, and directed light assemble themselves into the first room of the play. To the audience, the room appears complete. From your place near the wardrobe station, it is a shallow arrangement bounded by canvas walls, weighted braces, narrow passages, and people waiting just outside the light. The first performers enter. Their voices return through the wings with a different quality from the voices heard upstairs. Ordinary speech has become larger and more measured. Each phrase must cross the footlights, reach the boxes, and carry toward the back of the gallery without sounding like a shout. You cannot stand and watch for long. The first costume change is already approaching. A dresser lays out the required garments in their exact order. The coat is open. The fresh collar rests beside it. Gloves lie together with their fingers straight. A small ornament is placed where it can be taken without searching. The performer will have only a few minutes between an exit on one side and a later entrance elsewhere. A scene reaches its closing exchange. The caller shifts position. You hear the familiar line that warns everyone backstage that the exit is near. The performer comes through the wing at speed, still carrying the expression required by the scene. That expression disappears after 2 steps. The dresser receives the discarded outer garment. A fastening is released, one sleeve drawn free, then the other. The replacement coat goes on. You secure a hook at the throat while the dresser changes the cuffs. There is no need for discussion. The order has been practiced often enough to become a sequence of hands and turns. The performer raises one arm before being asked. The dresser holds the next garment at the correct angle. You smooth the collar, check the back, and step away. The caller gives the warning. The performer crosses to the opposite entrance, takes one controlled breath, and returns to the visible world of the play. An audience may admire the speed of the transformation without knowing that the change depends upon preparation measured in inches. A glove placed on the wrong side of the table can waste several seconds. A closed button can waste several more. If one garment is hung over another, the whole order must be disturbed. Backstage efficiency is built from removing small decisions before there is time to make them. The first act continues. Beyond the scenery, each department follows its own version of the play. The property workers do not hear only dialogue. They hear the line before a letter must be handed over, the movement before a decanter is needed, and the pause during which a chair must be shifted. The fly crew listens for warnings connected to hanging cloths and borders. Carpenters wait for the point at which one setting can be released and another brought forward. Musicians count bars, dressers count exits, you count changes. The audience sees one performance, but backstage there are many overlapping performances, each governed by a different sequence. They meet at the entrances, where a performer must arrive dressed, equipped, and ready at precisely the right moment. The narrow wing beside the stage is far less imposing than the scene it supports. A labeled property table stands against the wall. Ropes rise into darkness overhead. A shaded lamp gives enough light to identify an object without spilling brightness onto the set. Canvas flats show unpainted backs, marked with numbers and old pencil notes. A palace doorway viewed from behind is timber and stretched cloth. At about 8:30, the first act draws toward its scene change. Those not required for the closing moments move clear. The stage manager watches both the playing area and the crew. The warning is given before the curtain falls so that every worker knows which movement comes first. Applause begins. The curtain descends. At once, the elegant room separates into parts. Furniture is lifted rather than dragged. A wall turns sideways and becomes almost nothing. A cloth rises. Another setting comes forward from the darkness. Property workers remove the objects belonging to the first act and replace them with those required for the second. No one needs to raise a voice. Loud speech would make instructions harder to distinguish, and sound may travel farther into the auditorium than expected. You and the dressers are working at the same time. One costume is returned to its hanger. Another is carried to a dressing room. A skirt is checked after its train was caught briefly under a chair. The cloth is sound, but one line of trim has pulled away. There is no reason to remove the whole piece. You place 2 small stitches through the existing holes, knot the thread on the inner side, and flatten the trim with your thumb. Under the strong stage light, a loose edge might cast a shadow and appear larger than it is. Secured properly, it will not be noticed at all. This is one of the plain truths of stage illusion. The object does not need to withstand close examination from the stalls. It needs to produce the right impression at the proper distance, for the proper length of time. Painted moldings can suggest carved wood. Glazed cotton can catch light like a richer fabric. A shallow vessel can appear substantial if it is carried with suitable weight. An exterior wall may be made from canvas, pigment, and timber strips, yet seems solid when light meets it from the intended direction. Scale is managed in the same way. Details are enlarged so that they remain legible across the auditorium. Costume trim is wider than it might be on a visiting dress. Jewelry may be chosen for reflection rather than fineness. Face paint strengthens features that would otherwise flatten under illumination. A door is placed not where a real room would require it, but where an entrance can be seen. The illusion succeeds because attention is controlled. The audience is shown the finished surface and given little reason to inspect its edges. A voice claims the ear while scenery changes beyond sight. Music covers movement. A bright costume draws the eye away from a worker withdrawing a property in shadow. None of this makes the performance false in any simple sense. It makes it theatrical. The materials are selected not to imitate ordinary life in every detail, but to create a readable world within the shape of an auditorium. The second act begins before the last worker from the change has fully relaxed. A performer reaches for a glove at the property table and finds only its partner. The missing glove is not far away. It has been placed beside the wrong letter tray after the matinee. A property assistant locates it beneath a folded paper, carries it to the wing, and makes the handoff before the entrance. To the audience, there is no delay. A little later, a drawer in a stage writing table refuses to open. The performer tries it once, then continues the line while shifting position. A property worker approaches from the hidden side, presses the warped frame inward, and frees the drawer. When the performer turns back, it opens easily. That adjustment lasts only a moment, but it reveals a trained kind of cooperation. The performer does not pull repeatedly and make the problem visible. The worker does not interrupt the scene. Each leaves room for the other to repair the action. You notice the same quality when an entrance is delayed. The caller has delivered the warning. The performer should be waiting, but the passage remains empty. On stage, the preceding exchange reaches the line before the entrance. The prompter looks toward the wing. Then the performer appears, moving quickly but not noisily. A dresser has stopped one loose fastening that might have failed under movement. The delay has cost several seconds. On stage, another player extends a pause by crossing toward the fire grate and handling a paper. The action appears thoughtful rather than improvised. The late performer enters on the next suitable phrase, and the scene recovers its pace. Staff remember these recoveries. Preparedness matters, but no long run proceeds without misplaced objects, stiff mechanisms, uncertain timings, or garments that behave differently after repeated wear. Professional skill becomes clearest when the expected sequence breaks by a small amount. A dependable performer listens. If a line arrives early, the response adjusts. If a property is absent, the action changes without announcing the absence. If a colleague needs another breath, the pace allows it. Recovery is not a display of solitary cleverness. Its purpose is to protect the whole scene. The staff make the same judgment from their side. A good dresser does not burden a performer with an explanation during a rapid change. A property worker does not insist upon the planned handoff when another route has become safer. A caller gives the necessary words and no more. Good backstage work preserves attention for the next task. By 9 o'clock, the theatre has settled into the central stretch of the evening performance. The air in the passages is warmer now. Costumes returned from the stage carry the heat of movement and light. You hang them with space between the layers where possible. Damp fabric must not be folded into a heap because creases will set and linings will remain wet. A performer arrives for another change. This one involves a skirt, fitted bodice, gloves, and a different arrangement at the neck. The dresser releases the bodice while you hold the replacement ready. The skirt is stepped out of and lifted away. The next one is lowered over the head to save time, its inner supports guided past the shoulders without disturbing the hair. The fastening at the waist catches. You feel the resistance and stop. Pulling would strain the hook or tear the tape that anchors it. Instead, you turn the eye slightly with the tip of a pin, settle the hook, and press it closed. The delay is less than a breath. The performer reaches for the gloves. One is present, the other is not. The dresser checks beneath the discarded bodice. You check the chair. The missing glove has fallen inside the removed skirt. You retrieve it, shake it free, and place it into the waiting hand. The next call comes. Everything is ready. As the performer leaves, you set the discarded garments in order rather than dropping them onto the nearest surface. They may be needed again tomorrow, and tomorrow's speed depends upon tonight's care. During the following scene, a small ornament works loose from a sleeve. It is brought to you in the palm of a dresser's hand. You match the broken thread to the remaining stitches and attach it more firmly than before. The repair is made from behind so that no knot shows on the face. Around you, backstage movement continues in short, exact journeys. A property travels from table to hand. A message goes from prompter to caller. A chair leaves the stage and returns 2 scenes later. A musician waits through spoken dialogue for a cue that lasts only a few bars. Each task appears minor when considered alone. Together they maintain the production's shape. Near 9:30, the play enters its final act. Costumes for the curtain calls are checked even though the last scene has not begun. Hats are returned to their pegs. Outer garments are brushed. One crushed flower is replaced from the wardrobe box. A fastening that held through the matinee and most of the evening is reinforced because it must endure one more entrance. The crew also prepares for 2 endings at once. One is the conclusion seen by the audience. The other is the practical ending that follows it. Carpenters anticipate the last curtain. Property workers identify every object that must be collected. The fly crew waits for the final sequence. Front of house attendants prepare for opening doors and guiding the departing crowd. The stage doorkeeper expects messages, parcels, and requests for conveyances. On stage, the performers move into the last scene. From the wing, you see only part of the picture. A shoulder passes through the light. A voice reaches the final exchange. Another performer crosses behind a painted doorway and waits for an entrance that the audience reads as a journey from another room. The staff watch differently from those in the seats. You know which costume has just been repaired, which glove was found inside a skirt, which entrance was saved by an extended pause, and which apparently heavy furnishing can be carried by one worker. This knowledge does not lessen the effect. It shows how carefully the effect has been built. The final lines approach. Dressers stand ready for the release after the curtain. Property workers hold their positions until the last visible action is complete. No one begins clearing early. A production can be weakened in its final seconds by a sound from the wing or a shadow where none should fall. The last cue is given. For a moment, the stage picture holds. Then the curtain comes down and applause fills the theatre. The company assembles for the calls, garments are straightened, a missing accessory is no longer important. Faces turn toward the opening curtain, performers step forward together, bow, withdraw, and return when the applause asks for them again. You remain beyond the light with the dressers, callers, property staff, carpenters, musicians, and technicians whose work has carried the evening from overture to final bow. The audience sees the people before the curtain. Behind it, every department is already preparing to take the theatre apart and make it ready for tomorrow. The curtain rises once more, then settles for the last time. Applause continues beyond it, softened now by canvas, timber, and hanging cloth. The performers remain still for a breath, listening in case another call is required. When none comes, the company breaks formation. Public voices return to working voices. A leading performer asks whether the second act sleeve held properly. A supporting player remembers the missing glove and sends a dresser to look for it. Someone calls for a coat. Someone else wants the evening post. The stage manager crosses the company's path with the prompt copy under one arm, already making a note about an entrance that must be rehearsed tomorrow. Nothing here resembles the leisurely finish imagined by the audience. The work has changed direction, but it has not ended. At the front of the house, attendants open doors and guide patrons into the Strand. Programs lie folded beneath seats. Opera glasses are returned to their counter. The box office clerk checks the remaining ticket slips against the evening's receipts. In the passages, the last visitors look for cloaks, walking sticks, and waiting carriages. Their impressions of the performance are still being formed. They remember a phrase, a dress, a comic pause, or the final arrangement of figures beneath the lights. They do not see the stagehands entering as soon as the scenery may safely be touched. A painted wall moves sideways. A table is carried into storage. Properties return to numbered shelves or labeled baskets. Ropes are made secure. Work lights replace the stage picture with a dim, practical glow. The public doors are locked one by one. You go directly to the dressing rooms. Release after a performance must have its order, just as dressing did. Pins are removed before they catch in the fabric. Jewelry belonging to the theatre is returned to its case. Gloves are paired. Shoes are placed beneath the correct chair rather than pushed into a corner. A gown is lifted away from face paint and hair dressing before its wearer is free to put on ordinary clothes. The dressers know the sequence for each performer. They loosen what must be loosened, unhook what must be unhooked, and wait when a garment cannot be hurried. Tired hands are more likely to pull at a fastening, so the dressers take charge of it. You stand near the passage with your count sheet. One bodice comes back with all its hooks. Another has lost a strip of trim near the hem. A cloak smells faintly of damp wool because it waited too close to an open stage door passage. The repaired cuff has survived. The shortened skirt has cleared the stairs in both performances. A pair of evening gloves is present, but one has a dark mark across the palm. Each fact receives a pencil note. The performers leave at different speeds. Some change quickly and go through the stage door within minutes. Others remain while they remove paint, read notes, speak with management, or ask about the next rehearsal. The leading rooms empty later because there are more garments, more messages, and more people allowed to approach them. Flowers and cards must be collected. Parcels are identified. Personal items are kept apart from theatre property. The stage doorkeeper records departures with the same calm attention given to arrivals. This is one of the ways the staff know the company's true working habits. Not through private confession and not through a collection of dramatic secrets. You know who returns every borrowed object. You know who checks tomorrow's call before leaving. You know who thanks a dresser after a difficult change, and who remembers the name of the worker waiting with a cloak in the wing. You also know who leaves a trail of pins, powder, paper, and damaged fastenings behind. These details may appear small, but repeated work is built from small details. A single misplaced shoe is an inconvenience. A misplaced shoe every evening becomes extra labor assigned to someone else. One hurried request can be answered easily. A habit of arriving late places an entire chain of workers under pressure. The staff do not need to decide whether a performer is agreeable in every part of life. They need to know whether that performer can be ready at the beginner's call, follow altered movement, care for hired clothing, recover from a missed cue, and leave enough time for the next person to do a job properly. By 11:30, most street clothes have reappeared and most stage garments have reached the wardrobe rooms. The theatre is quieter, though never silent. A hammer sounds once from the stage. A broom moves along a passage. Somewhere below, a door closes against a draft. Musicians depart with cases in hand while the few instruments kept in the building are covered or put away. You begin the full count. Every production depends on knowing not merely that a costume exists, but where it is and what condition it is in. The inventory may list a gown, its separate bodice, a sash, 2 pieces of trim, gloves, shoes, and a hat. On stage, these appear as one complete figure. In the wardrobe book, they remain separate objects, because each follows a different path after the curtain. The gown requires airing. The bodice needs a hook replaced. The sash can be pressed. The gloves must be cleaned. The shoes go to the repair basket, because one fastening has begun to pull away. The hat returns to its box with tissue around the flowers. You and the dressers work along the rails. Garments used again tomorrow are not packed deeply into storage. They are hung with space between them so that damp cloth may dry. Sleeves are allowed to fall naturally. Skirts are shaken free of dust and examined beneath a steady lamp. Velvet is brushed in one direction. Crushed ribbon is removed where necessary, rather than forced flat while still attached. The items for the outside laundry are counted into a separate bundle. Collars, cuffs, linen pieces, and washable underlayers receive identifying marks. Anything sent away creates a small risk. It can be delayed, mixed with another order, or returned in poor time for the next performance. The record therefore gives the number and kind of every piece leaving the building. Pressing forms another group, repair forms another. A torn seam is rarely treated as an isolated event. You ask why it strained. Perhaps the performer made a larger movement after a change in rehearsal. Perhaps the seam allowance is too narrow. Perhaps the cloth has weakened after repeated cleaning. Sewing the opening closed may last for one performance. Changing the construction may save work for the rest of the run. That judgment belongs to you. The wardrobe mistress is not simply the person who keeps dresses tidy. You manage an active store of costly material under hard use. You decide which repairs can wait, which must be completed before the next call, and which require a different solution. You assign work among the dressers and sewing staff. You negotiate with management over replacement cloth. You keep hired goods in a condition that will not bring an added charge from the costumier. Your decisions also protect the performers. A fastening must open at the proper moment during a quick change, but never before. A hem must make a staircase safe without spoiling the visible line of the garment. A sleeve must allow the required gesture. A train must fall well when still and move cleanly when its wearer turns. None of these decisions earns applause of its own. Close to midnight, the actor-manager may still be speaking with the business office or studying reports from the house. The financial record will name the people whose presence sells seats. Billing order makes rank plain. Salaries, dressing room positions, costume allowances, and printed type all declare who stands nearest the center of the enterprise. Your books reveal another order. In them, importance is measured by dependence. The leading gown requires a dresser, a rail, a repair schedule, clean linen, working closures, the correct ornaments, and enough time before an entrance. The smallest role also requires its coat, hat, shoes, and place in the call. A missing piece can delay either one. The difference lies in how much attention management is prepared to purchase and how readily the public attaches a name to the result. The theatre encourages the belief that performance comes from gifted individuals appearing before an audience. Gift matters. Training matters. A performer must control voice, gesture, memory, position, and pace while remaining responsive to everyone else in the scene. The staff witness that skill more clearly than most patrons ever can. Yet individual skill reaches the audience through a shared machine made of human decisions. A caller gives the warning. A carpenter clears the path. A property worker places the letter or glass exactly where a hand expects it. A technician holds the light. A musician watches for the cue. A dresser prepares the next coat. You make certain its fastening will close. When all of this succeeds, it disappears. A review may praise the grace of an entrance without mentioning the altered skirt that made it possible. It may admire the richness of a costume without naming the hands that reinforced its seams. It may describe effortless confidence without knowing that a caller gave an extra warning because the performer had a demanding change 2 rooms away. This is not an argument against praise for the performer. The visible craft is real. It is an observation about how the theatre distributes credit. The better the backstage departments perform their duties, the less the audience is likely to notice that those duties exist. The arrangement has financial consequences as well as social ones. A celebrated player may gain higher billing, better terms, and offers from another theatre. A skilled wardrobe worker usually receives a steadier but far less visible form of recognition. Employment lasts while the production runs, while management remains satisfied, and while the budget continues to support the department. A long run offers regular wages. Its end can scatter the company and crew with little ceremony. For that reason, your authority is both substantial and narrow. Inside the wardrobe rooms, people seek your judgment. You can recognize failing cloth by touch. You can estimate whether a repair will hold through a matinee and an evening house. You know how strong stage light changes color, how movement alters a hem, and how to place a closure where hurried fingers will find it. Outside the theatre, few people know that such knowledge has a name. After midnight, the final dresser brings you the last missing piece. The glove found earlier in the evening has been recovered from behind a property chair. It is marked, paired, and returned to its place. You compare the count sheet with the rail. Everything needed for tomorrow is accounted for. Not everything is ready, but every task has been identified. The laundry bundle waits by the door. Repairs are arranged according to urgency. The first garments required at the next performance hang nearest to hand. You make one last circuit of the room. Here is the staff's real knowledge of the performers, who prepares carefully, who relies on reminders, who guards a voice, who adapts when a scene shifts, who respects the work surrounding an entrance, and who assumes that surrounding work will somehow complete itself. You know rank because budgets announce it. You know stamina through worn cuffs and loosened seams. You know generosity through ordinary courtesies exchanged when no audience is present. Most of all, you know that no performer works alone. Your own competence belongs inside the same truth. You have carried the production through rehearsal, matinee, evening performance, and shutdown. You have solved problems before they could become visible. You have preserved costly garments, protected the timing of changes, and made tomorrow's work possible. The system gives you limited credit for doing this well. That limitation does not reduce the skill. You lower the cover over the last costume. The cloth settles around the shoulders, keeping dust from the trim until morning. The account book closes. The wardrobe key turns in the lock. Beyond the door, the stage stands empty beneath its work lights. Painted rooms wait in darkness. Ropes hang still. The audience has gone, and the applause has faded into the streets. For a few hours, the theatre is quiet. Then the stage door will open, the rails will move, the calls will begin, and the whole careful process will be built again.